Have you ever been home alone late at night, heard an unexplained creak on the stairs, and felt that primal chill creep up your spine? That feeling, that sudden, instinctual knowledge that you might not be alone, is a thread that connects us all. It taps into a deep, universal curiosity about what lies beyond the veil of our everyday reality. And it's that very sensation we're chasing today. Across the sprawling, diverse landscape of the United States, from fog-drenched coastlines to dusty, forgotten towns, lie stories so strange and so deeply unsettling they have been seared into the local consciousness, passed down through generations as warnings, legends, and undeniable encounters. These aren't just campfire tales, they are accounts that challenge our understanding of the world, suggesting that some echoes of the past simply refuse to fade into silence. We are about to pull back the curtain on that hidden America, the one that exists just beyond the corner of your eye. Welcome, ghost hunters and curious minds, to a spine-tingling journey unlike any other. Over the next while, we will be your guides through a curated collection of the most bizarre and chilling paranormal events ever documented in this country. We have scoured historical records, pored over first-hand testimonies, and dug into archives to bring you a definitive tour of American ghost lore at its most incredible. We're talking about more than just fleeting apparitions. We're delving into full-bodied phantoms, intelligent hauntings that interact with the living, and phenomena that have left seasoned investigators utterly baffled. From the lonely roads haunted by phantom hitchhikers who vanish without a trace, to the hallowed grounds of old battlefields where spectral soldiers still march in silent formation, each story is a piece of a much larger, mesmerizing puzzle. This is a landscape painted with the echoes of unfinished business, tragic loss, and history that is still painfully, vividly alive, so get ready. This is a roller coaster of supernatural stories, a journey that will take you from the deep south with its moss-draped mansions to the industrial heartland with its restless factory spirits, and to the wild west where legends of long-lost prospectors still walk the desert. Each of the 33 encounters we will explore is stranger than the last, meticulously chosen not just for its fright factor, but for the compelling, often heartbreaking human story at its core. These tales are sure to send shivers down your spine, but they will also make you wonder, question, and perhaps even look at the quiet, dark corners of your own world a little differently. This is an invitation to explore the unexplained, to confront the strange, and to discover the ghostly heartbeat of America itself. Our journey into the strange begins not in a sprawling, creepy mansion, but on a humble farm in early 19th century Adams, Tennessee. Here, the story of the bell witch unfolds, a case so intense and well documented it has often been called the granddaddy of all American poltergeist hauntings. It all started around 1815 with John Bell, a respected farmer, who began experiencing bizarre phenomena on his property. It was subtle at first, sounds of rats gnawing on the bedposts, knocking on the doors and windows when no one was there. But this was no mere noisy spirit. The activity escalated with terrifying speed. The family, including John's wife Lucy and their children, particularly his young daughter Betsy, began to endure physical assaults. They would be slapped, pinched, and have their hair pulled by an unseen force. Blankets were ripped from their beds as they slept, and the entity displayed a shocking level of intelligence, seeming to know everything about the family's personal lives and even their private thoughts. What truly sets the Bell Witch apart from thousands of other ghost stories and cemented its place in legend was its voice. This was not a disembodied moan or a whisper, it was a fully articulate, speaking entity. It would hold long conversations with the family and the many visitors who flocked to the farm, curious about the rumors. The witch, as it came to be called, sang hymns, quoted scripture, and debated theology with a shocking depth of knowledge. Yet it could also spew the most venomous, vulgar insults, often directing its cruelest words at John Bell himself. The entity claimed to be the spirit of a local woman named Kate Batts, a neighbor of the Bells who had a known dispute with John over a business deal. It declared its singular purpose was to torment John Bell until it had killed him, and tragically it succeeded. John's health deteriorated under the relentless persecution. He suffered from seizures and facial paralysis, and in December 1820 he fell into a coma. The family discovered a mysterious vial of dark liquid in the house, which the witch proudly claimed was the poison it had used to finally kill John. A small amount given to the family cat reportedly caused the animal to convulse and die, and when John himself passed away, the witch celebrated with singing and taunts during his own funeral. The legacy of the Bell, which did not end with John Bell's death. The entity famously developed a strange fondness for John's daughter Betsy, often protecting her, and it even claimed it would return in the future. True to its word, it reportedly made an appearance to one of John Bell's direct descendants over a century later. This case sets an incredibly high bar for strangeness because it is not just a story of bumps in the night. It is a multi-year saga involving a fully interactive, intelligent, and malicious presence, witnessed by dozens of upstanding members of the community, including the future President Andrew Jackson, who allegedly visited the farm and had his own terrifying encounter that sent his entourage of tough frontiersmen fleeing into the night. The Bell, which presents a complete package of paranormal phenomena, physical violence, psychic knowledge, and articulate speech, all tied to a very human story of family tragedy and a historical record that continues to fascinate and unsettle investigators to this day. From the oppressive personal malice of the Bell farm, we journey now to the breathtakingly beautiful but equally haunted Rocky Mountains of Colorado, to a place where elegance and the afterlife exist side by side. Perched majestically above the town of Estes Park stands the grand and imposing Stanley Hotel, a sprawling white-pillared vision that seems to belong to a more refined and gentler era. But behind its beautiful facade lies a history buzzing with spectral activity, a reputation so powerful it famously inspired one of the most terrifying novels of all time. While the Stanley Hotel is often synonymous with Stephen King's The Shining, the real hauntings here are less about fictional axe murderers and more about the original proprietors who loved their creation so deeply they simply never left. The hotel was the brainchild of Freelan Oscar Stanley, one half of the inventive Stanley brothers who made their fortune with the steam-powered Stanley steamer automobile. After arriving in Colorado in 1903 for his health, the clean mountain air worked its wonders and he fell in love with the area. Determined to build a luxurious resort that would attract an elite clientele from the East, he opened the Stanley Hotel in 1909. It was his pride and joy, a testament to his success and vision, and he and his wife, Flora, were the epitome of gracious hosts, deeply involved in every aspect of the hotel's daily life. It is this profound attachment that many believe anchors their spirits to the property. Guests and staff have reported seeing the dignified apparition of F. O. Stanley, often in the grand lobby or the billiard room, seemingly still overseeing his domain, ensuring everything is running to his exacting standards. He is typically described as a well-dressed, kindly man who radiates a sense of pride and ownership before fading from view. Flora Stanley, a cultured and musically gifted woman, has left an even more audible imprint on the hotel's supernatural tapestry. A talented pianist, she would often entertain guests in the magnificent music room. To this day, long after her passing, the faint, elegant strains of a piano can be heard emanating from the empty room. The music is often identified as one of her favorite pieces, and on some occasions, witnesses have even reported seeing the translucent figure of a woman playing the grand piano before she vanishes. But Flora's ghostly hospitality doesn't stop there. Perhaps the most charming and widely reported phenomenon is the sound of a phantom party, the distinct, muffled noises of laughter, chatter, and the clinking of glasses that seem to come from the ballroom late at night. When investigated, the room is always found to be completely deserted, the echoes of a long-ago gala forever trapped in time. It's as if the Stanleys are still hosting their beloved guests, recreating the joyful social gatherings that defined the hotel's golden age. This makes the Stanley a fascinating counterpoint to the terror of the Bell Witch. Here, the hauntings are largely benevolent, even welcoming. The spirits aren't tormenting the living, they are continuing the routines and pleasures of their lives in a place they clearly adored. This hasn't stopped the hotel from becoming a world-renowned paranormal hotspot, drawing investigators and curious visitors from across the globe who hope to catch a glimpse of the original owners or hear Flora's ghostly recital. The management fully embraces this haunted heritage, offering ghost tours and even a dedicated paranormal investigation program. The Stanley's legacy is a unique blend of documented history and enduring spirit, proving that a haunting doesn't always have to be born from tragedy and malice. It can also spring from a love so powerful it transcends death itself. Now, let's shift our gaze from the majestic mountains to the sun-drenched California coast, where a different kind of giant rests, not made of wood and stone, but of steel and rivets, a floating palace with a past as deep and turbulent as the ocean it once conquered. Permanently docked in Long Beach, the retired ocean liner the Queen Mary is a breathtaking monument to a bygone era of transatlantic travel. But step aboard this Art Deco masterpiece, and you quickly learn it's not just a museum or hotel. It's a city at sea haunted by the echoes of its own dramatic history, earning it a reputation as one of the most actively haunted places in the entire world. The ship's story is a tale of two very different lives. Launched in 1936, she was the pinnacle of luxury, ferrying movie stars, politicians, and royalty across the Atlantic in unparalleled style. Her opulent salons, grand ballrooms, and lavish staterooms were the setting for glamour and celebration. But when the Second World War broke out, her role transformed overnight. Stripped of her finery and repainted a dreary grey, the Grey Ghost, as she became known, served as a troop ship carrying hundreds of thousands of soldiers to the front lines. This dual identity, a vessel of both joyous passage and wartime anxiety, is believed to be the very source of its profound spiritual residue. The sheer intensity of human emotion experienced within its hull, from the giddy excitement of a new life in America to the sheer terror of young men heading into battle, seems to have saturated the very metal of the ship, creating a perfect storm for paranormal activity. Among the many spirits said to wander the Queen Mary's countless corridors and decks, two figures have become particularly famous. The first is the sad specter known as the Lady in White, most frequently encountered in the ship's former first-class swimming pool, an area now empty of water but filled with a chilling atmosphere. Witnesses describe a beautiful woman in an elegant white evening gown from the 1930s, seen gliding near the pool's edge or simply staring into the empty basin. Some believe she may have met a tragic end, perhaps a heartbroken passenger or someone who drowned, her spirit forever drawn back to the site of her final moments. The pool area itself is a hotspot for disembodied voices, the sounds of splashing water, and the faint scent of chlorine where none exists, creating an unsettling sensory experience even for the most skeptical visitor. Perhaps even more heartbreaking is the spirit of a little girl named Jackie. Her story is centered around the former third-class children's playroom. Visitors and staff have long reported hearing the distinct, joyful laughter of a young child echoing through the room when it is completely empty. Others have claimed to see the fleeting image of a small girl in period clothing, and some have even felt the unmistakable sensation of a tiny, cold hand slipping into their own. The most poignant accounts involve interactions. She is known to respond to questions with a simple, whispered yes or no, While her full identity remains a mystery, the persistence of her playful, lonely presence suggests a spirit who found such happiness aboard the ship that she simply never wanted to leave, forever a child at play in her favorite room. But the hauntings are not confined to these two well-known figures. The Queen Mary is a labyrinth of supernatural activity. The ship's immense engine room, the literal heart that powered this colossal vessel, is known for the apparition of a young man in blue overalls, believed to be a mechanic who was tragically crushed to death by a heavy, watertight door during a routine drill. In the first-class staterooms, guests have reported waking up to find the figure of a man in an old-fashioned naval officer's uniform standing at the foot of their bed before vanishing. Unexplained knocking, the distinct sound of whistling in empty hallways, and the intense feeling of being watched are common reports. The sheer volume and variety of these encounters make the Queen Mary less like a single haunted house and more like a sprawling, spectral metropolis where the past is not dead, but is a living, breathing, and sometimes whispering layer of reality just beneath the surface of our own. Leaving behind the vast steel corridors of the Queen Mary, we now find ourselves drawn deep into the humid, moss-draped heart of Louisiana's plantation country, where history rests heavy in the air and the past feels unsettlingly close. Here in St. Francisville stands the Myrtles Plantation, a stunning example of antebellum architecture with a white columned facade that belies its dark and violent history. Widely reputed to be one of the most haunted homes in America, the Myrtles is less a peaceful museum and more a stage where a tragic drama from the 19th century seems to replay on an endless spectral loop. The central figure in this haunting tale is a woman named Chloe, an enslaved woman who lived and worked on the plantation in the early 1800s. As the story goes, Chloe was a house slave who caught the ear of the plantation's owner, Judge Clark Woodruff. Some versions say she was his mistress, others that she was simply eavesdropping on private family matters. When she was caught listening in on a private conversation, the legend states that as punishment, Judge Woodruff had one of her ears cut off. From that moment forward, Chloe is said to have worn a green turban to hide her disfigurement, a detail that becomes chillingly relevant to her ghostly appearances. Seeking revenge, or perhaps in a tragically misguided attempt to win back favor by making the family sick and then nursing them back to health, Chloe baked a cake laced with the poison from oleander leaves. The plan went horribly wrong. Instead of just falling ill, Judge Woodruff's wife, Sarah, and their two young daughters ate the cake and died. The other slaves on the plantation, fearing brutal reprisals or outraged by her actions, took justice into their own hands, dragging Chloe from the house and hanging her from a tree. Her body was then reportedly thrown into the Mississippi River. It is this brutal sequence of events that is believed to have anchored Chloe's spirit to the Myrtles plantation for all eternity. Her ghost is the most frequently reported apparition on the property, and she is almost always identified by that distinct green turban wrapped around her head. Witnesses describe seeing her peering shyly from around corners, her dark eyes visible just above the cloth. Others have reported hearing the soft, faint jingle of her slave bangles in empty hallways or catching the scent of her perfume in a room. She is often seen as a non-threatening presence, a sad figure forever bound to the scene of her terrible mistake and gruesome death. The very mirror she was said to have polished in the main house is now a focal point of the haunting. Legend claims that the spirits of Sarah Woodruff and her two poisoned daughters were trapped inside that mirror, and to this day, visitors and staff report seeing handprints appear on its surface that cannot be wiped away, and some have even glimpsed the ghostly, distorted faces of the lost children staring out from the glass. But Chloe is far from the only restless soul said to wander the sprawling grounds. The phantom laughter and running footsteps of children are constantly heard, believed to be the spirits of Sarah Woodruff's daughters, who died so young and so violently that their energy remains imprinted on the home. Another prominent ghost is that of a young girl who reportedly fell down the home's grand staircase. and her spirit is often seen playing on the steps or even tugging on the skirts or shirt sleeves of visitors, as if trying to get their attention. The property's history includes other violent deaths as well, including a Union soldier who was stabbed on the porch during the Civil War and is sometimes seen slowly bleeding from his wound, reenacting his final moments. This accumulation of tragedy makes the Myrtles a paranormal pressure cooker. The sheer volume of eyewitness accounts collected over more than a century from tourists, paranormal investigators, and even former caretakers is staggering. People report beds shaking violently in the middle of the night, antique furniture moving on its own, and disembodied voices whispering from empty rooms. The haunting is not confined to a single area. It permeates the entire house and its surrounding gardens, suggesting that the property itself holds the memories of the pain that unfolded there. Unlike the benevolent spirits of the Stanley Hotel, the entities at the Myrtles seem to be trapped in a cycle of their own trauma, reliving the fear, anger, and sorrow of their final days. It is a place where the Gothic romance of the Old South collides head-on with the brutal realities of its history, creating a haunting that is as layered and complex as the stories of the people who forever walk its shadowy hallways. Leaving the tragic, earthbound spirits of the Myrtles plantation behind, our journey into the strange now takes us skyward to the very rails that once bound a fractured nation together, where a legend of profound national mourning rolls on through the night. In the Hudson River Valley of New York, a different kind of specter haunts the landscape, not a person, but an entire event, a funeral procession forever frozen in time. This is the story of the Lincoln Ghost Train, a phantom of steam and sorrow said to carry the body of the assassinated President Abraham Lincoln on its final, mournful journey home. The legend is rooted in stark historical fact. After Lincoln's assassination in April 1865, his body was transported from Washington, D.C. on a nearly 2-week-long funeral tour across the country, allowing a grieving nation to pay its respects before his final interment in Springfield, Illinois. This journey, known as the Lincoln Special, was a massive undertaking, its route lined with countless mourners. The train's path through New York was particularly poignant, traveling along the Hudson River Railroad line, past towns where citizens stood in solemn, silent vigil by the tracks as the funeral car passed in the night. It is from this profound, collective outpouring of grief that the ghost train is said to have been born. The phenomenon is most often reported along old stretches of track that were part of that historic route, particularly near the town of Peekskill. Witnesses don't just see a faint image, they experience a full sensory apparition. It begins with an unnatural, sudden chill in the air and the appearance of a strange, localized fog that clings to the rails. Then, the unmistakable sound of a steam locomotive whistle pierces the silence, a lonely, mournful cry echoing from a past century. As the sound grows nearer, the train itself materializes, but it is like no ordinary locomotive. Descriptions are remarkably consistent over the decades. It is an antique steam engine, black and silent, pulling a series of darkened, vintage passenger cars. The entire train is often described as glowing with an eerie, ethereal light, sometimes seen as a faint bluish haze or an otherworldly amber glow from within the cars. But the most chilling detail, the one that elevates this from a simple ghost train to a national apparition, is the final car. This is always reported as a funeral car, draped in black crepe, with a flag-draped coffin visible inside, a perfect spectral replica of the one that carried Lincoln's body. Some accounts even mention the shadowy, formal figures of Lincoln's honor guard, sitting in stoic silence within the car, forever keeping their watch. The train passes witnesses without a sound, its mighty wheels making no noise against the rails, a silent, glowing procession before it vanishes as mysteriously as it appeared, leaving only the lingering cold and the fading echo of its whistle. The symbolic power of the Lincoln Ghost Train is what makes it such an enduring and compelling piece of American folklore. It is not merely a random haunting, it is a national ghost, a supernatural echo of the country's collective heartbreak. Abraham Lincoln's death was a trauma that shattered the nation at the very moment it was beginning to heal from the Civil War. The ghost train, then, can be seen as a manifestation of that unresolved grief, a symbol of a journey that never truly ended because the nation was never fully ready to say goodbye. It represents the idea that some events are so cataclysmic, so emotionally charged, that they can imprint themselves onto the very fabric of a place, replaying for those sensitive enough to witness them. Unlike a haunted house tied to a single tragedy, this is a haunting tied to the soul of a country, a rolling memorial that appears not to frighten, but to remind us of the profound cost of leadership and the enduring weight of a national loss. While skeptics often dismiss the sightings as misidentified modern trains or tricks of the light, the consistency of the reports spanning over a century is difficult to ignore. Railroad workers, police officers, and countless ordinary motorists have all reported nearly identical encounters, often with no prior knowledge of the legend. These aren't stories concocted around a campfire. They are first-hand accounts of an experience so vivid and bizarre that it leaves witnesses shaken and searching for answers. The Lincoln Ghost Train endures because it connects us directly to a pivotal moment in history, not through a textbook but through a visceral, supernatural experience. It allows us for a fleeting moment to stand alongside those 19th century mourners by the tracks, to feel the chill of that terrible spring, and to witness the funeral procession of a president forever traveling through the American night. But from the rolling, symbolic sorrow of a phantom train, we turn to a much more personal and visually arresting haunting, one made famous not just by witness testimony, but by what many believe to be the most convincing ghost photograph ever taken. Our journey takes us across the Atlantic to the English countryside, to the stately Raynham Hall in Norfolk, but the story of its resident specter, the Brown Lady, has become a cornerstone of American paranormal interest thanks to a single shocking image. The legend centers on Dorothy Walpole, sister of Britain's first Prime Minister, Robert Walpole. In the early 1700s, Dorothy was a vibrant socialite known for her beauty and spirited nature. Her life took a dramatic turn when she married Charles Townshend, the second Viscount Townshend, a man of immense wealth and political power. The marriage, however, was far from a fairy tale. Townshend was notoriously possessive and cruel, and his rage was fueled by rumors that Dorothy had been unfaithful to him before their wedding. In a fit of jealous fury, he was said to have locked her away within the vast, lonely confines of Raynham Hall, the very home that was meant to be her palace. According to the most tragic version of the story, Dorothy never left the estate alive. Some accounts claim she died from a sudden illness, perhaps a broken heart, while a much darker and more persistent legend insists that her death was anything but natural. This version alleges that in a fit of anger, Townshend pushed his wife down the grand central staircase of the hall, breaking her neck and killing her instantly. Whether by despair or violence, Dorothy Walpole's life was tragically cut short, and it is this injustice that is believed to be the source of her eternal unrest. She was buried not in the local churchyard with the rest of the Townshend family, but in a secret, unmarked grave on the grounds, a final indignity that would deny her even the peace of a proper memorial. It is this sense of being wronged and forgotten that seems to have anchored her spirit to the hall, forever clad in the brown brocade dress from which she draws her name. Sightings of the Brown Lady began not long after her death and have continued for centuries, weaving her into the very fabric of the estate. One of the most famous early encounters was by none other than King George IV, who, while staying as a guest at Raynham Hall in the early 19th century, reported waking in the night to see the figure of a woman in an old-fashioned brown dress standing by his bedside, her face glowing with a soft, eerie light. He was so shaken by the experience that he reportedly insisted on leaving the hall immediately. Throughout the 1800s, guests and staff alike reported seeing her gliding gracefully through the long corridors, often on the main staircase where she was said to have met her end. She was frequently described not as a frightening specter, but as a sad, beautiful woman with empty, haunted eyes, her face sometimes visible and at other times completely obscured by a glowing, ethereal mist. The legend of the Brown Lady exploded into the public consciousness in 1936, an event that would forever cement her place in paranormal history. The esteemed magazine Country Life was preparing a feature on the historic Raynham Hall and sent two photographers, Captain Provand and his assistant Indri Shearer, to capture images of the interior. While setting up their camera at the bottom of the famous staircase, Shearer saw what he described as an ethereal, veiled form beginning to descend the steps. He shouted to Provand to take the photo immediately, and the captain, without even looking through the viewfinder, fired the shutter and activated the flash. When the glass plate negative was developed, it revealed a stunning and unmistakable image, a translucent, shrouded figure seemingly floating on the staircase with a glowing, misty face and the distinct outline of a dated brocade gown. This photograph was examined by experts at the time, including officials at Country Life and even the Kodak company, who all confirmed the negative had not been tampered with or double exposed. It became a worldwide sensation, and to this day, it remains one of the most debated and analyzed paranormal images in existence, offering what many consider to be tangible proof of Dorothy Walpole's sorrowful, enduring presence. The haunting did not end with that famous photograph. In the decades since, residents and visitors to Raynham Hall have continued to report encounters with the Brown Lady. Some have felt a sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature on the staircase, while others have heard the soft rustle of silk skirts in empty hallways. Her apparition is still seen, a silent, mournful reminder of a life cut short by cruelty and jealousy. The portrait of Dorothy Walpole that hangs within the hall itself is said to possess an unnerving quality, with her eyes seeming to follow visitors around the room, a final, poignant connection to the woman trapped by the walls of her own home. The story of the Brown Lady is a classic Gothic tragedy, a tale of love turned to poison, of power misused, and of a spirit so determined to be remembered that she left her portrait not just on canvas, but on a photographic plate for all the world to see. From the sorrowful elegance of an English manor, we are transported to a place of pure, unadulterated despair, a rocky island fortress where the very concept of hope was systematically stripped away. Rising from the cold, swirling fog of the San Francisco Bay, Alcatraz Island stands as a monument to punishment and isolation. Known universally as The Rock, its name alone conjures images of America's most notorious criminals languishing in tiny, cold cells, forever separated from the world by miles of treacherous, frigid water. But while the prison officially closed its doors in 1963, countless reports suggest that for many of its former inmates, their sentence was never truly completed. Alcatraz is not just a museum to a dark past, it is a penitentiary where the echoes of anguish seem to have been permanently sealed within its concrete walls, creating one of the most intense and well-documented paranormal hotspots in the country. The sheer volume of human misery concentrated in such a small space is often cited as the reason for its profound haunting. For nearly 3 decades, Alcatraz housed the nation's most disruptive and dangerous prisoners, men like Al Capone, George "Machine Gun" Kelly, and Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz. Life inside was a monotonous, soul-crushing routine of silence, strict discipline, and the constant, maddening sound of the bay's foghorns and the wind howling outside. Men were broken here, not reformed. This atmosphere of concentrated negativity, fear, and rage appears to have saturated the prison's very foundations, leaving behind a spiritual residue that is palpable to visitors and staff to this day. The hauntings are not confined to a single ghost story, but are a cacophony of disembodied sounds and fleeting apparitions that bring the prison's terrifying history back to life after dark. Perhaps the most commonly reported phenomena are the auditory remnants of prison life. Tour guides and overnight guests frequently report hearing the distinct, jarring sound of heavy iron cell doors slamming shut in empty, locked cell blocks, a sound that would have signified the end of any fleeting freedom for an inmate. These are not faint noises, they are loud, metallic clangs that seem to come from specific, vacant cells. Even more chilling are the disembodied screams and desperate, muffled weeping that echo through the corridors, particularly in the dead of night. These are not the sounds of playful ghosts, but the tormented cries of men trapped in a never-ending nightmare, their suffering forever imprinted on the atmosphere. Many have also reported the phantom sound of running footsteps, echoing the frantic pace of escape attempts or the hurried steps of guards responding to an incident, patrolling the galleries long after their watches have ended. While many spirits remain anonymous, a few have gained legendary status, their identities tied directly to the prison's most famous residents. The ghost of Al Capone himself is said to haunt the prison's shower room. The notorious Chicago gangster, a man who ruled his criminal empire with an iron fist, was reportedly driven to the brink of insanity by his confinement on the Rock. He spent much of his time in isolation and was known to have been terrified of being shivved by other inmates, even in the showers. Visitors to the dank, tiled shower room have described feeling an overwhelming sense of paranoia and being watched, and some have even reported seeing the shadowy figure of a man cowering in a corner, a figure that vanishes when approached. It is a sad, ironic end for such a powerful man, his spirit seemingly forever trapped in the place of his greatest fear and humiliation. Yet the epicenter of Alcatraz's paranormal activity is undoubtedly Cell Block D, the prison within, a prison that housed the worst of the worst. This was the disciplinary block, home to the dreaded strip cells and solitary confinement, pitch-black, unheated holes where men were locked away for weeks with only a sink and a hole in the floor. The energy in this block is universally described as heavy, oppressive, and deeply malevolent. The most famous ghost of Cell Block D is a presence known simply as the Shadow. This entity is not a full-bodied apparition but a dense, human-shaped mass of darkness that is frequently seen darting across the end of the cell block or standing menacingly in empty cells. Those who have encountered it report an immediate drop in temperature and a feeling of pure dread, as if they are in the presence of something deeply angry and dangerous. Others have reported being physically touched or pushed by an unseen force in this block, and electronic voice phenomena recordings from investigators often capture aggressive, snarling whispers and pleas for help. The credibility of Alcatraz's hauntings is significantly bolstered by the sheer number of sober, first-hand accounts from former guards, National Park Service rangers, and everyday tourists. In the early days of the island's operation as a tourist attraction, night watchmen would report seeing lights flickering on in cell blocks that had no power and hearing the unmistakable sound of voices and clanging metal coming from areas they had just secured. One particularly compelling account comes from a park ranger who, while locking up for the night, heard the clear sound of a harmonica playing from within Cell Block D, a sound that was a known fixture of prison life. When he went to investigate, the music stopped and he found the block completely empty and silent. These are not stories born from overactive imaginations. They are consistent, repeated experiences from individuals with no reason to fabricate such tales, adding a layer of undeniable authenticity to the eerie reputation of the Rock, a penitentiary where the prisoners may have checked out, but some were clearly never allowed to leave. Yet from the grim isolation of Alcatraz, we emerge into the dazzling, sun-kissed glamour of Los Angeles, where fame and the afterlife walk the same hallowed halls. Our next stop is the legendary Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel, a landmark that has been the playground for cinema's brightest stars since it first opened its doors in 1927. This isn't just a place to stay, it's a monument to the golden age of Hollywood, the site of the very first Academy Award ceremony, and a timeless symbol of Tinseltown magic. But beneath the shimmering surface of its glamorous history lies a deeper, more mysterious layer, a place where the applause has faded but the stars themselves have, in a sense, never left the stage. The Roosevelt is a haven for the ghosts of Hollywood's past, a hotel where the line between then and now is as thin as a strip of celluloid. The most iconic of these spectral residents is arguably the most famous woman in the world, Marilyn Monroe. The Roosevelt was a familiar refuge for Marilyn. She lived there for a time early in her career, and her photograph still graces the walls, a testament to her deep connection with the place. It is in the room she frequently occupied that her presence is most strongly felt. Guests and staff have reported an uncanny phenomenon involving a full-length mirror that once hung in her suite. This mirror, which has since been moved to the hotel's lower level, is said to occasionally reflect something or someone that isn't there in the room. People have glanced into its glass and seen, not their own reflection, but the unmistakable image of Marilyn Monroe standing behind them, her blonde hair and captivating smile perfectly captured for a fleeting moment before she vanishes. Others have reported catching the faint, sweet scent of her signature perfume in the empty hallway outside the room, a ghostly signature from an icon who left an indelible mark on the hotel. But Marilyn is not the only luminous spirit said to linger in this palace of dreams. Another prominent ghost is that of the broodingly handsome actor Montgomery Clift, who lived in the Roosevelt for 3 months during the filming of From Here to Eternity in 1953. A talented musician as well as an actor, Clift would often practice his trumpet to relax in his room. To this day, long after his tragic death, the clear, mournful sound of a trumpet solo is heard echoing through the hallways near his former room. The music is not a faint, distant echo, but is often described as crisp and present, as if the actor is simply in the next room, lost in his practice. It's a hauntingly beautiful reminder of a talented life cut short, a private moment from a very public figure that has been etched into the hotel's atmosphere for eternity. The haunted history of the Hollywood Roosevelt extends beyond its most famous celebrity guests. The entire building seems to pulse with the residual energy of its roaring 20s origins and the countless lives that have passed through its doors. The Grand Blossom Ballroom, the very site of that first Oscars ceremony, is often the stage for phantom parties. Late at night, security guards and cleaning crews have reported hearing the distinct sounds of a swinging big band, the murmur of a sophisticated crowd, and the clinking of champagne glasses, as if the glamorous event is forever happening just out of sight. Some have even reported seeing the fleeting, shimmering forms of partygoers in flapper dresses and tuxedos, dancing the night away in a celebration that never ends. Even the hotel's famous swimming pool, located in the basement and decorated with a vibrant David Hockney mural, has its own playful phantom, a young girl in an old-fashioned swimming costume who has been seen splashing in the water before disappearing without a trace. What makes the Hollywood Roosevelt so compelling is the nature of its hauntings. Unlike the tormented spirits of Alcatraz or the tragic figures of the Myrtles plantation, the ghosts here seem to be enjoying a perpetual after-party. They are echoes of joy, of creativity, of fame, and of the vibrant lives that were lived within these walls. The hotel management fully embraces this paranormal reputation, offering ghost tours and even hosting special events centered on its haunted history. For visitors, it offers a unique opportunity to step back in time and perhaps just for a second, rub shoulders with the legends who built Hollywood. It suggests that for some, the allure of the spotlight is so powerful that not even death can dim its glow, and that the most glamorous party in town is one that has been going on for nearly a century, long after the final curtain has fallen. But for all the celebrity glitz of Hollywood, there are far older and more desolate waters in America that hold tales of spectral mariners, where the ghosts are not individuals but entire lost ships. To understand these legends, we must travel inland to the vast, unpredictable freshwater seas known as the Great Lakes. These massive bodies of water, particularly Lakes Superior, Michigan, and Huron, have been a vital maritime highway for centuries, but they are also a graveyard. Thousands of ships have been lost to their sudden, violent storms, and it is from these watery graves that some of the most haunting phantom vessel legends have risen, creating a uniquely American version of the classic ghost ship myth. The most famous of all is the story of the SS Edmund Fitzgerald, a tale so embedded in the national consciousness that it transcends mere ghost story and has become a modern maritime ballad of tragedy and mystery. The Edmund Fitzgerald was a colossal iron ore freighter, a true queen of the Great Lakes, stretching over 700 feet long. On November 9, 1975, she was on a routine run across Lake Superior, loaded with 26,000 tons of taconite pellets. She was being pursued by one of the most vicious storms in the lake's recorded history, with hurricane-force winds and waves estimated to be over 35 feet high. The captain of a nearby ship, the Arthur M. Anderson, was in radio contact with the Fitzgerald's captain, Ernest McSorley. In his last transmission, Captain McSorley reported, "We are holding our own." But just hours later, the Fitzgerald vanished from the Anderson's radar screen. No distress call was ever heard. The mighty ship, with her entire crew of 29 men, was swallowed by the fury of Lake Superior in an instant, sinking so quickly that the crew likely had no time to react. The wreckage was later found 17 miles from Whitefish Bay, Michigan, the ship broken in two on the bottom, a tragic and sobering discovery. While the Edmund Fitzgerald herself lies in a deep, watery grave, her story did not end there. Almost immediately, reports of a ghostly apparition began to surface. On the anniversary of the sinking, and during other fierce autumn storms, fishermen, lighthouse keepers, and other sailors on Lake Superior have reported a chilling sight: the ghostly form of a massive freighter, its running lights glowing faintly through the snow and spray, moving against the wind and waves as if still fighting the storm that claimed it. Witnesses describe seeing the entire ship, often just for a few moments, before it fades back into the fog and darkness. Some have even reported hearing the faint, desperate sound of a ship's bell tolling, a sound that echoes the memorial bell at the Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum that bears the names of the 29 lost souls. This phantom Fitzgerald is not seen as a malevolent presence, but as a somber, relentless echo of one of the Great Lakes' most profound tragedies, a ship and crew forever trying to complete their final, fateful voyage. The legend of the Fitzgerald is the most modern and well-documented, but it is part of a much older and richer tapestry of Great Lakes phantom ships. Another famous specter is the Flying Dutchman of Lake Michigan, a ghost schooner that has been sighted for over a century. The most common version of the legend tells of a schooner that left Chicago in the late 1800s, loaded with a cargo of lumber and a crew in high spirits heading north. They sailed directly into a sudden, brutal squall that whipped the lake into a frenzy. The ship was never seen again, but its ghost began to appear to other sailors. The apparition is always the same: an old-fashioned two-masted schooner with tattered sails, glowing with an eerie, greenish light, seen sailing directly into the wind, an impossible feat. The sighting is considered by old sailors to be a dire omen, a warning of an approaching storm so severe that any ship encountering the phantom should immediately seek the nearest safe harbor. These phantom vessels are often tied to a specific and eerie phenomenon known as premonitory apparitions, where the ghost of a ship appears before its actual demise. There are documented accounts from the 19th century of crews reporting seeing a familiar vessel sailing normally, only to later discover that ship had sunk in a storm hundreds of miles away at the exact same time it was sighted. In one chilling case, the crew of a lighthouse on Lake Huron reported seeing a known schooner pass by in clear weather, waving to the figure they saw at the helm. Days later, they learned the ship had gone down in a gale on Lake Superior the very day they saw it, making their sighting a ghostly premonition of the disaster. These stories suggest that on the Great Lakes, the line between the living and the dead, between the present and the past, can become dangerously thin, especially when the famed gales of November begin to howl. The power of these maritime ghost stories lies in the awesome and terrifying nature of the Great Lakes themselves. Those who have never seen them often underestimate their power, thinking of them as mere lakes. But seasoned sailors know they are inland oceans, capable of producing waves as tall as any at sea and storms that can materialize with shocking speed. This immense, unpredictable power, combined with the sheer number of ships and lives lost over the centuries, has created a fertile ground for legend. The ghost ships of the Great Lakes are not just campfire tales. They are a form of collective memory, a way for the seafaring community to process and remember the very real dangers of their trade and the countless sailors who have been lost to the deep, cold waters. They serve as eternal, spectral reminders of the price of sailing these beautiful but deadly freshwater seas, where the past is always present just beyond the veil of the next rolling fog bank. From the tragic, open waters of the Great Lakes, we now travel to the very heart of Silicon Valley, to a place where innovation's future is shadowed by a bizarre and haunted past. In San Jose, California, nestled among modern office parks, stands an architectural marvel of sheer eccentricity, the Winchester Mystery House. This sprawling, 160-room Victorian mansion is a labyrinth of bewildering design, a physical manifestation of one woman's profound grief and her desperate, lifelong battle against the unseen. Its story is not just one of ghosts, but of the living person who built a monument to them, creating a structure so strange it has become a permanent fixture in the annals of American paranormal lore. The entire saga begins with Sarah Winchester, the widow of William Wirt Winchester, treasurer of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company and heir to the massive fortune generated by the iconic rifle that, as the slogan went, won the West. But this fortune was built on a foundation of death, and after Sarah lost both her infant daughter and her husband within a short period, she was left a grief-stricken, immensely wealthy woman. Legend has it that she sought guidance from a Boston medium who delivered a terrifying diagnosis. The medium claimed that the Winchester family was cursed, haunted by the vengeful spirits of the countless thousands who had been killed by the Winchester rifle. The only way for Sarah to atone and escape this spiritual persecution was to move west and continuously build a grand house for these spirits. The medium allegedly told her that as long as construction never stopped, she would remain alive, but the moment the hammers fell silent, she would die. Driven by fear and sorrow, Sarah Winchester took this advice to heart. In 1884, she purchased an unfinished 8-room farmhouse in the Santa Clara Valley and began a construction project that would continue unabated, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 38 years. The result is a mind-bending maze that defies all architectural logic. This was not a home designed for the living, it was a fortress built to confound the dead. The house is a chaotic jumble of staircases that lead directly into ceilings, doors that open onto blank walls or 2-story drops to the ground below, and hallways that twist back on themselves in endless loops. There are windows built into floors, closets that open into other rooms, and a dizzying number of small, seemingly useless chambers. Sarah's nightly seances in a special room, known as the Blue Room, were said to be where she would receive building instructions directly from the spirits, leading to the next day's often nonsensical construction plans. The house became her life's work, a physical prayer and a desperate attempt to appease the phantoms she believed were relentlessly pursuing her. Given its purpose-built origin, it is no surprise that the Winchester Mystery House is considered intensely haunted, with many of the phenomena directly echoing the sounds of its own perpetual construction. One of the most frequently reported experiences, both by staff and visitors, is the sound of phantom hammering. The distinct rhythmic tap-tap-tap of a hammer on wood is heard in remote wings of the mansion, often in areas that are completely empty and closed to the public. It's as if the ghostly labor Sarah set in motion is still continuing, a spectral crew forever working on a project that can never be complete. The sound of footsteps is also incredibly common, but these are not the heavy footfalls of a single entity. Witnesses describe hearing two distinct sets of footsteps. One set is light and quick, believed to be Sarah Winchester herself, still pacing the halls and overseeing her domain. The other is the heavier, slower tread of a workman, perhaps one of the carpenters who dedicated his life to her strange vision and remains bound to the site even in death. Specific rooms within the mansion have gained notorious reputations. The Grand Ballroom, a beautiful and opulent space that was never once used for a party, is a hotspot for disembodied voices and the faint sound of classical music, as if a ghostly celebration is happening just beyond our perception. The infamous door to nowhere on the second floor, which swings open to reveal a 15-foot drop to the garden below, is often the site of a chilling cold spot, and some visitors have reported a powerful, unseen force trying to pull or push them toward the open doorway. In Sarah's own seance room, people have experienced sudden, overwhelming feelings of sadness and despair, along with the sensation of being watched by a crowd of unseen presences. Even the modern gift shop, built in a former greenhouse, is not immune. Employees have reported items flying off shelves on their own and cash registers opening and closing by themselves long after the last tourist has left. The legacy of the Winchester Mystery House endures because it is a haunting of a different order. It is not the story of a single violent event imprinted on a location, but the story of a haunting that was actively, obsessively courted and accommodated for nearly 4 decades. The house itself is the ghost, a physical embodiment of fear, guilt, and the desperate human desire to control the uncontrollable. Paranormal investigations are regularly conducted there, often capturing compelling electronic voice phenomena that whisper names and pleas, and anomalous photographs showing misty figures in the endless hallways. The sheer duration and scale of Sarah Winchester's project, coupled with the consistent and peculiar nature of the reported activity, make it a uniquely compelling case. It stands as a breathtaking, bewildering monument to one woman's attempt to build her way out of sorrow, creating a home not just for herself, but for the restless spirits she hoped to placate, forever sealed within its confusing and beautiful walls. And now, we turn from a house built for phantoms to a landscape where phantoms are an indelible part of the very soil. There are few places in America where the past feels as present, as raw, and as restless as the rolling fields and quiet woodlots of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Over 3 sweltering days in July 1863, this quiet college town became the site of the bloodiest battle ever fought on American soil. A cataclysmic clash that left over 50,000 men as casualties, dead, wounded, or missing. The scale of the violence, the intensity of the suffering, and the sheer historical importance of the event have seemingly left a permanent scar on the land, one that many believe continues to bleed psychic energy. Gettysburg is not just a preserved battlefield. It is a vast, open-air memorial where the echoes of the Civil War are not merely imagined, but are frequently seen and heard by the thousands of visitors and the park rangers who work there every day. The phenomena reported across the battlefield's 6,000 acres are as varied as the regiments that fought there, but many encounters share a common, chilling theme, a complete sensory immersion into the past. One of the most common and spine-tingling reports is of phantom cannon fire. On quiet, foggy mornings or in the deep stillness of a summer night, the unmistakable, low rumble of artillery has been heard rolling across the fields, particularly in areas known as artillery alleys, where cannon duels were most intense, such as near Seminary Ridge. These are not faint, distant sounds, but often loud, percussive booms that seem to vibrate in your chest, accompanied by the crackle of phantom musket volleys that sound like a string of firecrackers popping in the distance. These auditory hauntings are so convincing that park rangers have occasionally been dispatched to investigate, only to find the fields completely empty and silent, the source of the noise having vanished as completely as the armies of Lee and Meade. Beyond the sounds of battle, the most profound encounters involve full-bodied apparitions of the soldiers themselves. These are not vague, shadowy figures, but incredibly detailed, tangible-looking men in full Union blue or Confederate gray uniforms. They have been seen marching in formation through the woods, standing guard at historically significant locations like Little Round Top, or even appearing wounded and disoriented, wandering the roads as if searching for their field hospital or their long-lost unit. The Phantom Brigade is perhaps the most famous of these spectral sightings, a recurring vision of an entire regiment of soldiers, often seen marching in perfect order across the fields near the Devil's Den or through the famous peach orchard. Witnesses describe seeing the entire formation, sometimes hundreds strong, materialize out of the evening mist, their colors flying, their boots making no sound as they advance across the terrain before fading away one by one, disappearing back into the twilight from which they came. What gives the hauntings of Gettysburg such immense credibility is the sheer volume of first-hand accounts from credible, often reluctant witnesses. Park rangers, trained professionals tasked with historical preservation and public safety, are among the most frequent sources of these stories. Many rangers have shared experiences of seeing a lone soldier standing near a historic stone wall, only to have the figure vanish when they approach to offer assistance. Others tell of hearing desperate, whispered pleas for water or mother coming from the same fields where thousands of wounded men languished for days in the brutal July heat. One particularly chilling and well-documented account involves a modern-day park maintenance worker who, while locking up the National Park Service storage building in the old Pennsylvania College building, encountered a disheveled, frantic man in a tattered Union uniform who rushed up to him shouting, "What are you doing here?" This building is needed for the wounded, before turning a corner and completely disappearing. The building had in fact been used as a field hospital, a fact the maintenance worker was not immediately thinking about at the end of his long shift. Visitors, too, often leave the battlefield with stories they never expected to tell. Tourists on guided ghost walks have captured photographs showing transparent soldiers standing amidst the crowds, images that reveal details like buttons and insignia upon close examination. Families taking a quiet evening drive have reported seeing campfires flickering in the woods with shadowy figures huddled around them, only to find the area completely deserted when they return with park authorities. The emotional weight of these encounters is often profound. People don't just report seeing a ghost, they report feeling an overwhelming sense of sorrow, of confusion, or of sheer terror, emotions that seem to be a direct residue from the men who experienced those feelings in their final, agonizing moments. The hauntings of Gettysburg are not playful or mischievous. They are somber, heavy, and deeply rooted in the traumatic reality of one of the nation's most defining and divisive conflicts. It is a place where history is not just remembered, but is palpably, hauntingly alive, a testament to the idea that some events are so monumental and so tragic that their participants are granted a form of immortality, forever bound to the ground upon which they fought, bled, and died for their cause. But from the vast, hallowed ground of a national battlefield, we descend into a much more intimate and deeply personal kind of hell, hidden behind the elegant ironwork and pastel hues of New Orleans' French Quarter. If Gettysburg represents a national trauma, then the LaLaurie Mansion embodies a private, domestic evil so profound it has become synonymous with the city's darkest secrets. At the corner of Royal and Governor Nichols Streets stands a beautiful, three-story mansion that seems the very picture of antebellum grandeur, but its lovely exterior is a carefully crafted lie. This is the site of one of the most sickening and well-documented cases of cruelty in American history, a story of torture and murder that has left a spiritual stain so powerful The building is often avoided by locals even today, considered a permanent blight on the soul of the city. The horror begins with Madame Delphine Lalaurie, a wealthy socialite who in the 1830s was at the very pinnacle of New Orleans high society. Famous for her extravagant parties and exquisite taste, she was the last person anyone would suspect of the atrocities happening within her own home. The first public hint of the nightmare emerged in 1833 when a fire broke out in the mansion's kitchen. As neighbors and firefighters rushed to help, they made a discovery that would shatter the city's complacency. They found the Lalauries' elderly black cook, a woman named Lena, chained to the stove by her ankle. She confessed that she had started the fire intentionally, preferring to die in the flames than endure another moment of Madame Lalauries' torture. When authorities insisted on searching the rest of the property, they uncovered a secret attic chamber, a scene of such unimaginable brutality that the hardened policemen of the era were physically sickened. What they found was not a simple prison, but a sophisticated torture chamber. Shackled to the walls were several enslaved individuals, all in states of extreme mutilation and suffering. The reports, documented in newspapers and court records at the time, described victims with their limbs systematically broken and reset at grotesque angles to resemble crabs, another who had been repeatedly flayed and had their skin coated in boiling brine, and one individual who had been subjected to crude surgical experiments with a large hole drilled into their head and their intestine. Partially pulled out and coiled around their body, these were not acts of rage committed in a moment of passion. They were the calculated, sustained cruelties of a person who viewed other human beings as mere objects for her sadistic amusement. An enraged mob formed almost instantly, storming the mansion, but Delphine and her husband, Dr. Louis Lalaurie, had already fled, escaping justice by carriage and eventually making their way to France, where she is believed to have died, never having answered for her crimes. It is this legacy of unimaginable suffering that has anchored one of the most violent and intense hauntings in the United States. The phenomena reported at the Lalaurie mansion are not the gentle, residual echoes of a bygone era. They are aggressive, terrifying, and deeply interactive. The most common and disturbing report is the sound of screaming. Not faint, distant moans, but blood-curdling, agonized shrieks that seem to emanate from the upper floors and the courtyard, screams that carry the raw terror and pain of the victims trapped within those walls. Residents and caretakers over the decades have reported hearing the distinct, horrifying sounds of whips cracking and chains rattling in the dead of night, a ghostly reenactment of the torture that occurred there. The apparitions witnessed are equally chilling. The ghost of Delphine Lalaurie herself has been seen on the mansion's balcony, peering down at Royal Street with a haughty, malevolent glare, as if still surveying her domain. Yet it is the victims' spirits that are most frequently encountered. Shadowy figures are seen darting through the hallways, and full-bodied apparitions of emaciated, terrified enslaved people have been reported in the courtyard, often seen cowering or attempting to hide. Perhaps the most heartbreaking encounter involves the ghost of a young enslaved girl who is said to have fallen to her death from the rooftop while trying to escape Madame Lalaurie's wrath. Witnesses have seen her spectral form tumbling from the roof, only for it to vanish before hitting the ground, forever reliving her desperate final moments. Others report the feeling of being physically pushed or grabbed by unseen hands, a palpable sense of anger and despair so thick it can feel suffocating. The credibility of the haunting is bolstered by its famous tenants. In the 20th century, the mansion was owned by none other than actor Nicolas Cage, who reportedly never spent a single night in the house, perhaps heeding the local warnings. Before his tenure, the building served as a furniture store, a conservatory, and a bar, with employees from each era consistently reporting poltergeist activity, objects flying off shelves, and an overwhelming sense of being unwelcome. The haunting of the Lalaurie mansion is a stark reminder that some evils are so profound they cannot be washed away by time or paint. It stands as a physical testament to a brutal chapter of history, a place where the screams of the tortured have, according to countless witnesses, been permanently etched into the very atmosphere, ensuring that the victims of Delphine Lalaury's unspeakable cruelty are never, ever forgotten. But from the dark history of a New Orleans mansion, we journey now to the sun-bleached coast of Florida, to a place where a beacon of hope and guidance stands guard over a tragic past. The St. Augustine Lighthouse, with its iconic black and white spiral stripes rising against the blue sky, is one of the most recognizable landmarks in the nation's oldest city. It has guided mariners safely to shore for well over a century, but for many, its most compelling guides are not the beams of its lamp, but the spirits of those who never left its grounds. This is a location where the joyful energy of children intertwines with the stern presence of a dedicated keeper, creating a haunting that is both heartbreaking and strangely beautiful. The central tragedy that fuels the lighthouse's paranormal reputation involves the daughters of Hezekiah Pitty, the superintendent of the lighthouse's construction in the 1870s. The story goes that the young girls, whose names are often given as Mary and Eliza, were fascinated by the rising iron and brick tower. One day, the girls decided to take a joyride in a wooden cart that was used to haul materials up a tramway on a tall, sloping ramp next to the lighthouse. For reasons lost to time, perhaps a failure of the braking mechanism or simply youthful exuberance, the cart careened out of control. It flew off the tracks, plummeting to the ground and killing both sisters instantly. This devastating loss of such young, vibrant lives is believed to be the source of the most frequently reported and poignant phenomenon at the site. To this day, visitors and staff consistently report hearing the unmistakable, carefree sound of children's laughter echoing around the lighthouse keeper's house and the surrounding grounds. The laughter is often described as bright and playful, seeming to come from just around a corner or from an empty room upstairs. Some have even reported seeing the fleeting figures of two young girls in 19th-century dresses, holding hands and seen playing near the base of the very ramp where they lost their lives, their spirits forever captured in a moment of innocent play. Yet the spectral residents are not limited to the Pitty sisters. The ghost of a former lighthouse keeper, often identified as Joseph Andrew, who served in the 1850s, is also a prominent figure in the lighthouse's haunted tapestry. Andrew met his own tragic end when he fell from the lighthouse while performing maintenance, painting the exterior. His devoted wife, Maria Mester de los Dolores Andrew, subsequently took over his duties, becoming the first Hispanic-American woman to serve as an official lighthouse keeper in the United States. It is the spirit of a male keeper, however, that is most often encountered within the tower itself. Many visitors climbing the 219 steps to the top have reported a sudden, overwhelming feeling of not being alone. They describe the distinct scent of cigar smoke wafting through the tight, circular staircase, even though smoking is strictly prohibited inside the historic structure. Others have felt a firm, invisible hand on their shoulder, as if someone is steadying them on the climb, or have glimpsed the shadowy figure of a man in keeper's attire peering down at them from the landings above before vanishing into the shadows. This presence is generally not considered malevolent, but rather a vigilant caretaker who is still, in his own way, watching over the lighthouse and its visitors. The strange phenomena experienced by staff and modern-day paranormal investigators add further compelling layers to the location's active reputation. The lighthouse is a certified haunted location that even offers official ghost tours and overnight investigations, and the amount of data collected is substantial. Staff members routinely report hearing phantom footsteps pacing in the empty keeper's house after closing hours, and objects, particularly tools and artifacts related to the lighthouse's operation, are frequently found moved from their designated spots overnight. On the tower's service ladder leading to the very top, people have reported feeling their clothes being tugged or pulled by an unseen force, a disconcerting experience when you are high above the ground. Electronic voice phenomena recordings from investigations have captured clear, whispered responses to questions, including one famous recording where a researcher asked, "Is anyone here?" and received a crisp, childlike whisper answering, "In the tower." Perhaps one of the most chilling modern accounts came from a maintenance worker who was alone in the basement of the keeper's house. He saw the clear apparition of a young girl who looked directly at him, smiled, and then simply faded away, leaving him with an unshakable sense of having communicated with a presence from another time. This accumulation of consistent witness testimony from tourists, paranormal experts, and museum staff alike makes the St. Augustine Lighthouse a must-visit destination for anyone interested in the supernatural. It stands as a place where tragedy and duty have collided, leaving behind an emotional residue that is both sorrowful and protective. The laughter of the two young girls serves as a bittersweet reminder of lives cut short, while the steadfast presence of the keeper suggests that some forms of service truly are eternal. It is a haunting that feels deeply woven into the fabric of the location, a story of a family's profound loss and a keeper's unwavering commitment that continues to play out within the shadow of the towering structure that has watched over St. Augustine for generations. Leaving behind the coastal sorrows of St. Augustine, our exploration of America's ghostly tapestry now takes us to the very epicenter of national power, to a building whose corridors have echoed with world-changing decisions and, according to countless accounts, with the footsteps of its former inhabitants long after their deaths. The White House in Washington, D.C., is far more than the president's home and office. It is a living museum of American history, a structure that has witnessed moments of triumph, tragedy, and profound transformation. It should come as no surprise that such a place, saturated with intense emotion and pivotal events, is also considered one of the most actively haunted houses in the country, where the spirits of former commanders-in-chief and first ladies seem to remain on duty, adding a fascinating supernatural layer to the nation's political legacy. The most prominent and frequently reported spectral resident is, without question, the towering figure of Abraham Lincoln. The assassination of the 16th president was a national trauma that resonated deeply within the walls of the executive mansion, a place where he endured the immense pressures of the Civil War and where his young son, Willie, tragically died of typhoid fever. Lincoln's ghost has been sensed by an astonishing array of people, from prime ministers to housekeeping staff. Perhaps the most famous account comes from the administration of Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands. During a visit in the 1940s, she was staying in the Lincoln bedroom when she heard a distinct knock at her door in the middle of the night. Upon opening it, she was confronted by the unmistakable apparition of Lincoln himself, wearing his signature stovepipe hat and tailcoat, standing solemnly in the hallway. The Queen was so startled she reportedly fainted on the spot. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt often spoke of feeling Lincoln's presence while she worked in her study, a sensation she never feared but accepted as a comforting, watchful oversight. Even the formidable Prime Minister Winston Churchill, after a long bath and a brandy, reportedly emerged from his room to see Lincoln leaning against the fireplace in the same bedroom. True to his character, Churchill allegedly quipped, "Good evening, Mr. President. You seem to have me at a disadvantage," before the figure faded away, after which Churchill made a point of never sleeping in that room again. But Lincoln's spirit is not the only one said to wander the historic halls. The vivacious and formidable Dolly Madison, wife of the fourth President James Madison, is another perennial presence. Her connection to the White House is deeply rooted in history. She was the one who famously saved the portrait of George Washington from being captured by British soldiers when they burned the building during the War of 1812. It seems her protective, social nature has kept her spirit bound to the place she loved. Groundskeepers and staff have reported seeing her ethereal form tending to the Rose Garden, a place she took great pride in during her life, seemingly still ensuring the flowers are perfectly arranged. Her ghost is also frequently associated with the East Room, the very chamber where she held her legendary society gatherings. On occasion, staff preparing for a state function have reported catching the fleeting scent of rose perfume and the glimpse of a woman in early 19th century dress, as if she is overseeing the preparations for one of her legendary parties, ensuring that the tradition of White House hospitality is maintained to her exacting standards. Another youthful and tragic spirit is that of Willie Lincoln, President Lincoln's beloved son, who died in the White House at just 11 years old. The grief of his loss was said to have been almost unbearable for the president, who would occasionally retreat to the crypt where Willie was temporarily interred to hold the boy's body. This profound paternal sorrow seems to have left an indelible mark. During the administration of President George W. Bush, a visiting head of state's young child was reportedly found having a conversation with a funny-looking boy his own age in one of the hallways. When asked who he was talking to, the child described a boy in old-fashioned clothes who said his name was Willie and that he was looking for his father. Staff members throughout the decades have also reported hearing the phantom sounds of a child sobbing or running playfully through the halls, a poignant reminder of a young life cut short and a spirit still yearning for the comfort of his family. The phenomena are not limited to visual apparitions. Unexplained sounds are a constant feature of the White House's paranormal profile. The distinct, heavy footfalls of a tall man pacing back and forth have been heard outside the Lincoln bedroom, matching historical accounts of Lincoln's own restless nocturnal habits as he wrestled with the fate of the nation. The faint, melancholic strains of violin music, an instrument the president enjoyed, have also been reported. In other parts of the mansion, the sound of doorknobs rattling and doors opening and closing on their own is so common that many long-serving staff members no longer question it, accepting it as a normal part of working within a building so alive with history. The ghost of Andrew Jackson, known for his fiery temper, is said to haunt his old bedroom, now known as the Rose Room. Several First Ladies, including Mary Todd Lincoln herself and more recently Lady Bird Johnson, have reported hearing loud, raucous laughter and even angry cursing emanating from the room, a spectral echo of the man known as Old Hickory still holding court. These persistent sightings and experiences, documented by credible witnesses across 2 centuries, transform the White House from a mere symbol of government into a deeply human space. The hauntings suggest that the personal dramas, the profound grief, and the powerful personalities of its former residents are as much a part of its foundation as the stone and mortar. It is a place where history is not a dry subject in a textbook, but a living, breathing, and sometimes whispering presence. The fact that prime ministers, first families, and career staff all share similar stories lends a powerful credibility to these accounts, making the White House not just the seat of American political power, but also one of its most authentic and enduring repositories of ghost lore, where the past occupants continue to make their presence known to those who walk the corridors of power today. Now we leave the hallowed halls of power for the lonely, rain-slicked streets of Chicago's Southwest Side, where a very different kind of American legend plays out night after night. Along the stretch of Archer Avenue that winds through the suburbs of Justice and Willow Springs, a phantom has been thumbing for a ride for nearly a century, her story so deeply embedded in the local consciousness that she has a name, Resurrection Mary. This is not a ghost confined to a single building or battlefield. She is a creature of the road, a recurring echo of a specific, tragic moment that motorists claim to relive with chilling regularity, making her perhaps the most famous phantom hitchhiker in the world. The core of the story is hauntingly simple and consistently reported. A driver, typically a lone man traveling down Archer Avenue late at night, spots a young woman standing by the roadside. She is always described in a similar way, beautiful with pale blonde hair and dressed in a white party dress or a light-colored gown, sometimes even clutching a small white purse. Despite the hour or the weather, she appears to be waiting for something, and the compassionate driver pulls over to offer her a ride, she gets into the car, often seeming quiet, sad, or dazed. She gives the driver an address, usually a dance hall that once stood along the avenue, like the long-gone O. Henry Ballroom or the Willowbrook, and asks to be taken home. As they drive, the driver might attempt to make conversation, but the girl remains distant, staring out the window into the darkness. Then, as the car passes the gates of the sprawling Resurrection Cemetery, something inexplicable happens. The girl lets out a small gasp or simply falls silent, and in the blink of an eye she vanishes. She doesn't open the door or jump out. She simply fades into thin air, leaving the stunned driver alone in a suddenly empty car, often with the lingering scent of perfume or a profound chill in the seat where she was just sitting. The variations on this tale are part of what gives it such enduring power. In one of the most detailed early accounts from the 1930s, a young man named Jerry Pallas claimed he not only picked Mary up but had danced with her all evening at the O. Henry Ballroom. They had a wonderful time, but after a minor quarrel, she ran out of the dance hall in tears. Jerry got in his car to search for her and was horrified to find her crumpled body on the road near the cemetery, the victim of a hit and run. When he contacted the authorities and led them back to the scene, her body was gone. Another chilling twist involves taxi drivers. Several have come forward over the decades claiming they picked up a fare matching Mary's description, only to have her vanish from the back seat during the ride, leaving them with an unpaid fare and a story they would never forget. The details shift, with each telling the color of her dress, the exact dance hall she names, the specific spot where she disappears. But the central, unsettling sequence of events remains a constant, a ghostly script that has been followed by countless alleged witnesses. Her connection to Resurrection Cemetery is the anchor of the entire legend. Many believe Mary is the spirit of a young woman named Mary Bregavi, who was killed in a car accident in the 1930s, though no definitive proof has ever linked that specific tragedy to the ghost. Others suggest she is the ghost of a Polish girl from the 1920s who was killed after a dance and buried in the cemetery wearing her white confirmation dress. The cemetery itself has become a focal point for the phenomenon. In the 1970s, there were reports of a young woman in a white dress seen gripping the cemetery's iron bars, her hands fused to the metal as if in a final, desperate attempt to get out. When guards arrived, she was gone, but the bars were reportedly bent and bore the faint, scorched impression of human hands. This tangible, physical evidence, whether real or embellished, added a powerful new layer to the myth, solidifying the idea that Mary is forever trying to return to her grave after her nightly excursions. So why has this particular ghost story resonated so powerfully for so long? Resurrection Mary taps into something primal and universal. She is the embodiment of a life cut tragically short, a young woman on the cusp of adulthood, dressed for a party, forever denied her journey home. The setting of the lonely road at night is a place of inherent vulnerability and isolation, a stage where the line between reality and the supernatural feels thinnest. The narrative is also a perfect, self-contained ghost story. It has a clear beginning, middle, and end, and the twist of her disappearance is a visceral, shocking moment that is easy to imagine and sends a shiver down the spine of anyone who has ever driven a lonely road after dark. She is not a malevolent spirit, she is a sad, trapped soul, and our instinct to help her is what draws us into her tragic orbit. This combination of pathos, mystery, and a perfectly timed supernatural jump scare has cemented Resurrection Mary not just as a local Chicago legend, but as a permanent and iconic fixture of American folklore, a ghost who continues to hitch a ride into our collective imagination. But the opulent staterooms and grand ballrooms are only one layer of the Queen Mary's haunted reputation. To truly understand the depth of the supernatural activity, we must descend deep into the ship's belly, into the massive cathedral-like space that was its beating mechanical heart, the engine room. This is a world of immense machinery, of labyrinthine catwalks and towering pistons, a place where the air itself feels heavy with the legacy of sweat, oil, and immense pressure. While the upper decks hosted glamorous parties, the engine room was a realm of relentless, grueling work and very real danger, a combination that has left behind one of the ship's most intense and well-documented spiritual residues. The hauntings here are not of elegant socialites but of the hard-working crew who kept this floating city moving, and their presence is often far more visceral and unsettling. The most famous specter of this underworld is a figure known affectionately, and perhaps a little grimly, as Half-Hatch Harry. His story is rooted in a verifiable, tragic accident that occurred during the ship's wartime service. The legend tells of a young 18-year-old engine room worker who was tasked with a routine job near one of the ship's massive watertight doors. These doors are crucial for a vessel's safety, designed to be sealed rapidly to contain flooding in an emergency. On this particular day, a miscommunication or a terrible twist of fate led to the door being slammed shut while the young man was either passing through it or working directly in its path. The result was a horrific, instantaneous death, with the crushing door severing his body at the waist. It is this gruesome and sudden end that is believed to have anchored his spirit to the location where he died. To this day, crew members, maintenance workers, and visitors on ghost tours consistently report encountering the apparition of a young man in oil-stained blue overalls, his form only visible from the waist up, as if eternally trapped in the moment of the accident. He is often seen mopping the floors or simply standing with a look of shock or confusion before fading away, a permanent, spectral member of the engineering crew. Beyond this singular, tragic figure, the engine room is alive with the phantom sounds of its former operation, especially during the quiet hours when the ship is dormant and the tourists have departed. The Queen Mary's engines are permanently still, great silent monuments of a bygone era of sea travel. Yet, countless witnesses have reported hearing the distinct, rhythmic churning and powerful thrum of the massive turbines starting up and running at full power, sounds that seem to vibrate up through the metal deck plates and into the bones of those who hear them. These are not faint, distant echoes, but loud, convincing mechanical noises that suggest the ship is, for a few ghostly moments, once again cutting through the Atlantic at full steam. Alongside these engine sounds, people report the clanging of metal tools on pipes, the hiss of escaping steam from long-sealed valves, and the frantic, phantom shouts of crew members calling out to one another over the din of the machinery. It's as if a full shift of spectral engineers has clocked in for the night, forever maintaining the systems that once powered the great liner. This area has become a world-renowned hotspot for paranormal investigators, who flock to the engine room for its reputation of producing some of the most clear and compelling electronic voice phenomena, or EVP, recordings anywhere. In the stark silence broken only by these phantom noises, investigators ask questions into the dark, and the responses they capture are often startlingly direct. Recordings have captured gruff, disembodied voices growling, "Get out," or "Leave us be." Others have captured the desperate, pleading whispers of men in pain, or the simple, exhausted sigh of someone who has just finished a long, hard shift. The confined, metallic nature of the space seems to act as a perfect resonator, trapping these auditory imprints of the past. The activity is so pronounced and consistent that the Queen Mary's official ghost tours always feature the engine room as a centerpiece, with guides sharing the stories of Half-Hatch Harry and playing back some of the most chilling EVPs for brave visitors, making the theoretical concept of a haunting a tangible, audible experience. The intensity of these maritime hauntings is no coincidence. The engine room was a place of constant peril. The machinery was powerful enough to maim or kill in an instant, the temperatures were often scorching, and the air was thick with the potential for steam burns or mechanical failure. The crew who worked here lived with a level of daily stress and vigilance that is difficult for us to imagine, a state of heightened awareness necessary for their own survival and the survival of the 6,000 souls aboard. This constant undercurrent of danger, combined with the tragic reality of accidental deaths like that of Half-Hatch Harry, created a perfect storm of intense human emotion. It is this potent mixture of fear, fatigue, camaraderie, and sudden, violent death that many paranormal researchers believe fuels the hauntings. The energy of those moments, the final, terrified thought of a young man, the collective focus of a crew battling to keep the engines running during a storm, the sheer force of will required to manage such awesome power, has seemingly been absorbed into the very steel of the ship. The ghosts of the engine room are not on a pleasure cruise. They are still on the job, forever bound to the machinery that defined their lives and for some, so tragically ended them. Yet for all the widespread activity and the lingering presences of its founders, there is one specific location within the Stanley Hotel that has risen above all others to become the epicenter of its supernatural fame, a place where the line between inspiration and manifestation becomes terrifyingly blurred. This is room 217, a chamber that has transcended its role as a simple guest accommodation to become a living legend, forever linked to one of the most iconic horror novels of all time. The story of this room begins not with a ghost, but with a young, aspiring writer and his wife checking in on a stormy night in 1974. The hotel was preparing to close for the winter, and Stephen and Tabitha King were the only guests in the entire vast building. They were given room 217, and as the story goes, King had a nightmare so vivid and terrifying that he awoke in a sweat, lit a cigarette, and began scribbling the first chapter of a novel that would become The Shining. The hotel itself, with its endless, empty corridors and palpable sense of isolation, became the Overlook Hotel in his mind, and room 217 became the catalyst for a masterpiece of modern horror. But what makes this room so potent? The history points to a very real and tragic event that occurred in 1911, just 2 years after the hotel first opened. A chambermaid named Elizabeth Wilson was tending to the gas lamps in room 217 when a terrible accident occurred. As the legend recounts, a powerful storm was raging outside and the windows to the room were left open. A gust of wind supposedly extinguished the flame of the lamp Elizabeth was lighting, causing a massive buildup of gas. When she struck a match to relight it, the accumulated gas ignited in a tremendous explosion. Elizabeth was thrown across the room and seriously injured, suffering 2 broken ankles. While she did not die from her injuries, the violent and traumatic nature of the event, coupled with her long and dedicated service to the hotel, is believed to be the reason her spirit chose to remain, becoming the room's primary and surprisingly maternal spectral caretaker. Guests who have stayed in room 217 report a pattern of activity that is uniquely personal and oddly helpful, centered around this ghostly maid. The most famous and frequently recounted phenomenon involves luggage. Upon returning to their room after a day of sightseeing or an evening ghost tour, guests have often found their suitcases and travel bags neatly unpacked, with their clothing carefully folded and placed in drawers or hung in the closet. In other instances, the exact opposite occurs. Items that were left neatly put away are discovered scattered across the bed or the floor, as if someone has been meticulously searching through them. Lights and faucets are another common point of interaction. People report leaving their room with every light switched off, only to return and find bedside lamps or the bathroom light glowing warmly. Others have experienced the faucets in the sink or bathtub turning on by themselves, the water running for no apparent reason. This is not the chaotic, frightening activity of a poltergeist, but rather the behavior of a spirit who seems to be continuing her duties, perhaps fussing over her guests in her own spectral way. This sense of a protective presence is perhaps the most compelling aspect of the haunting. There are numerous first-hand accounts from guests, particularly those with young children, who have felt a distinct calming watchfulness in the room. One family reported that their crying infant was suddenly soothed by the gentle, rhythmic rocking of their empty stroller, which moved back and forth on its own for several minutes. Another guest awoke in the middle of the night to feel a gentle, motherly hand brushing the hair from their forehead before the presence simply faded away. These benevolent encounters stand in stark contrast to the terrifying fiction the room inspired, suggesting that Elizabeth Wilson's spirit is more concerned with hospitality than horror. However, not all experiences are so gentle. Some visitors have reported waking up to the sensation of the mattress depressuring as if someone has sat down on the edge of the bed, only to find no one there. Others have heard the distinct sound of a woman humming softly to herself, or the rustle of a long, starched skirt moving across the floor in the dead of night, auditory echoes of a maid still going about her timeless rounds. The hotel management fully embraces the legacy of Room 217, even keeping a journal within the room where guests can document their own paranormal encounters. The pages of this book are filled with hundreds of entries, from the mundane to the truly unexplainable, creating a collective testimony that is difficult to dismiss. The room itself is one of the most requested and booked in the entire hotel, often reserved months or even years in advance by paranormal enthusiasts and Stephen King fans hoping for their own brush with the supernatural. What makes Room 217 such a powerful symbol of the Stanley's haunted reputation is this perfect storm of elements: a verifiable historical tragedy, a direct link to a globally recognized work of fiction, and a continuous stream of credible, first-hand accounts that paint a consistent portrait of an intelligent, residual presence. It is a place where story and spirit have become irrevocably intertwined, proving that sometimes the most terrifying hauntings are not born from malice, but from a simple, enduring sense of duty that has persisted long after the final breath has been taken. And so we find ourselves returning to the shadow-draped porches of the Myrtles plantation. But this time we are drawn not to the ghost of Chloe in her green turban or the phantom children on the staircase, but to a single, chilling object that seems to concentrate the home's tragic energy into one shimmering, silvered surface. In the main parlor, hanging with an air of quiet menace, is an antique mirror that is far more than a decorative piece. It is, according to legend, a prison for souls, a window into the past, and the epicenter of one of the plantation's most visually arresting hauntings. The story woven around this mirror is as intricate as its gilded frame, claiming that after the poisoning of Sarah Woodruff and her two daughters, their spirits were not able to pass on. Instead, in a final, desperate act, a servant, some say Chloe herself, attempted to clean the mirror, and in doing so, somehow captured the souls of the deceased mother and her children within the glass itself, trapping their essences for all eternity. This is not a legend of fleeting glimpses. It is one of persistent, tangible evidence witnessed by countless visitors over the decades. The most commonly reported phenomenon involves the sudden, inexplicable appearance of handprints on the mirror's pristine surface. Guests and tour guides have watched in astonishment as foggy, child-sized prints materialize on the glass, as if small, invisible hands are pressed against it from the other side. No amount of wiping or cleaning can remove them permanently. They fade away only to reappear later, a ghostly signature that defies all rational explanation. But the sightings go far beyond mere handprints. Many have reported seeing full, recognizable faces staring back at them from within the mirror's depth. These are not vague, shapeless smudges, but distinct visages often described as a woman with a sorrowful expression, believed to be Sarah Woodruff, or the innocent, round faces of her two young daughters. The terrifying part for many witnesses is that these faces do not simply mimic their own reflection. They are separate entities looking out from within the glass, their expressions frozen in a moment of time from the 19th century. Some have even claimed that the faces react to the living, their eyes following people around the room or their expressions shifting from sadness to anguish. The mirror's reputation has made it a primary target for paranormal investigators who have descended upon the Myrtles with an array of sophisticated equipment, hoping to validate the claims. The results have been startlingly consistent. During electronic voice phenomenon sessions, investigators asking questions directed at the mirror have captured clear, whispered responses, including the word "help" and the faint, plaintive cry of a child. Temperature scans have revealed drastic, localized cold spots directly in front of the glass, drops of 20 degrees or more that cannot be attributed to any draft or environmental factor. Perhaps most compelling are the photographic anomalies. While many ghost photos can be dismissed as lens flare or dust, investigators at the Myrtles have captured images of the mirror that show unmistakable, human-like forms within the reflection, figures that were not present in the room when the photo was taken. In one famous series of photographs, a translucent, woman-shaped mist can be seen emerging from the surface of the mirror, stretching out into the parlor before dissipating into nothingness. These technical findings move the legend of the mirror beyond mere folklore and into the realm of documented, albeit controversial, paranormal evidence. What makes this particular haunting so uniquely unsettling is its passive, observational nature. Unlike a spirit that moves through a hallway or slams a door, the entities in the mirror are always there, watching. They are a captive audience to the living, their eternal prison hanging in plain sight in a room where people laugh, talk, and take photographs. This creates a profound sense of voyeuristic dread, the feeling that you are not just in a haunted house, but that you are being permanently observed by the tragic residents of its past. The mirror serves as a perfect metaphor for the plantation's history itself, beautiful and polished on the surface, but holding a dark, captured truth just beneath. It suggests that some tragedies are so powerful they can fracture the very nature of reality, creating a tear in the fabric of time and space that allows the past to literally reflect back upon the present, forcing us to gaze into the eyes of those who can never truly leave. But the true heart of Alcatraz's darkness, the epicenter of its paranormal agony, lies in the stark, silent confines of cell block D. This was the prison within the prison, a place reserved for the most unmanageable inmates, those who had broken the few rules that existed on the rock. Stepping into this block feels different. The air is heavier, colder, and seems to resist your very presence. While the main cell blocks held the noise and motion of hundreds of men, Cell Block D was designed for sensory deprivation and absolute control, and it is within these solitary confinement cells, known as the holes, that the most intense and disturbing phenomena consistently occur. Visitors and investigators describe an immediate and overwhelming sense of despair upon entering, a feeling so potent it can induce nausea and vertigo, as if the walls themselves are weeping with the accumulated misery of the men who are broken within them. These were not cells, they were tombs for the living, pitch-black, unheated concrete boxes where inmates were stripped naked and given only a thin, gruel-like diet, left for weeks at a time in total silence and darkness as punishment. The sheer psychological torture inflicted here appears to have created a perfect storm for spiritual unrest, leaving behind echoes that are far more aggressive and visceral than those found elsewhere on the island. Within the solitary confinement cells, the paranormal activity is not subtle. The most frequently reported phenomenon is a sudden, bone-chilling drop in temperature. In a cell that was a moment before at room temperature, you can experience a wave of cold so profound it feels like stepping into a walk-in freezer, a cold that seems to seep right through your clothes and into your bones. These cold spots are highly localized, often confined to a single cell or a specific corner, and they can appear and vanish in an instant. Accompanying this physical chill is a palpable feeling of being watched, followed by an intense, primal sense of dread that grows until it becomes almost unbearable, compelling many to flee the area entirely. This isn't the nervousness of being in a creepy place. It's a deep, instinctual fear, a warning from some ancient part of your brain that you are in the presence of something deeply wrong and potentially dangerous. Many who have spent time in these cells report feeling short of breath, as if an invisible weight is pressing down on their chest, or experiencing sudden, inexplicable headaches and waves of intense sadness or anger that feel foreign, as if they are absorbing the emotional residue left behind by the inmates. Then there are the shadow figures. While full-bodied apparitions appear elsewhere in Alcatraz, the entities in cell block D often manifest as these dense, human-shaped forms of pure blackness. They are most often seen darting across the end of the cell block corridor, peering out from within the open doors of the solitary cells, or standing menacingly in the darkness of a vacant cell. Witnesses consistently describe them as being darker than the surrounding shadows, a void that absorbs light, and they move with an unnerving, fluid speed. Unlike the residual hauntings of marching soldiers or phantom cannon fire, these shadow figures seem to possess a chilling awareness. They have been known to react to the living, retreating when a light is shined directly on them or even advancing toward people as if challenging their presence. The most famous of these is the entity known simply as the Shadow of Alcatraz, a tall, imposing figure that is frequently reported in the worst of the solitary cells. Overnight investigators have captured video footage of these shadows moving independently of any living person, and thermal imaging cameras have recorded drastic temperature drops coinciding with their appearance, suggesting they are drawing energy from their environment to manifest. The stories from overnight ghost hunts and the experiences of park rangers add immense credibility to these claims. One well-documented account involves a team of paranormal investigators who decided to conduct a solo vigil, locking one of their members inside a solitary confinement cell in cell block D. The investigator was equipped with a walkie-talkie and a camera. For the first few minutes there was only silence. Then, the team outside the cell block heard his breathing become ragged over the radio. He began reporting the temperature plummeting and the feeling of invisible, cold fingers wrapping around his throat. Suddenly, he started screaming, not in fear, but in raw, guttural rage, cursing and shouting threats that were completely out of character for him. When his teammates rushed to unlock the heavy door, they found him huddled in a corner, sobbing and disoriented, with no memory of his outburst. He later described an overwhelming flood of hatred and violence that had washed over him, emotions that he was certain were not his own, as if a malevolent presence had temporarily invaded his mind. This account aligns with many others where people report sudden, uncharacteristic mood swings and violent impulses while in the solitary cells, pointing to an intelligent, oppressive force that can directly influence human emotion. The harsh, unrelenting history of this place is undeniably the source of these lingering spirits. Men were sent to the holes for infractions as minor as talking back to a guard or refusing to work, and the psychological damage was often permanent. Inmates reported hallucinating, losing their grip on reality, and some never fully recovered after their release back into the general population. It was in these stark, concrete boxes that men were pushed to the absolute brink of human endurance, and in some tragic cases beyond it. The emotional energy of that level of despair, fear, and rage is a potent force, and many paranormal researchers believe it has become imprinted on the location, creating a kind of psychic scar tissue. The phenomena are not random, they are a direct reflection of the suffering that occurred. The cold spots mirror the bitter chill the nearly naked inmates endured. The shadow figures embody the formless dread and the loss of identity they experienced in the absolute darkness. The feelings of suffocation and panic echo the claustrophobic terror of being sealed in a lightless tomb. Alcatraz's cell block D stands as a terrifying testament to the human capacity for cruelty and the enduring nature of the spirit, proving that some punishments are so severe they can trap a soul long after the body has been freed from its concrete chains. But the story of the Brown Lady would likely have remained a localized English ghost story, confined to the annals of country house folklore, if not for a single, stunning event that catapulted her into the global spotlight and forever changed the conversation about paranormal evidence. In September 1936, the esteemed society magazine Country Life commissioned a photographic survey of the historic Raynham Hall. The assignment fell to two experienced photographers, Captain Hubert C. Provand and his assistant, Indri Shearer, they were professionals tasked with documenting the architecture and interiors, not with hunting for ghosts. On the 19th of that month, they were wrapping up their work in the hall, specifically focusing on the grand oak staircase, the very staircase from which Dorothy Walpole was said to have been flung to her death. Provand was under the black cloth of his large tripod-mounted camera, composing a shot of the staircase while Shearer stood by, ready to activate the powder flash. It was then that Shearer saw it. He later gave a sworn statement describing a strange, ethereal mist beginning to take shape on the staircase and slowly descend toward them. As it moved, it coalesced into the distinct form of a veiled woman. Shearer, his heart pounding, shouted to Provand, "Quick, quick, there's something, are you ready?" Provand, without even removing his head from beneath the cloth, instinctively replied, "Yes," and pressed the shutter release. Shearer simultaneously ignited the flash. The moment the brilliant light flooded the staircase, the apparition vanished. The two men, thoroughly shaken, developed the glass plate negative right there in the hall's basement darkroom, fearing that their story would be dismissed as fantasy. To their astonishment, the developed plate revealed exactly what Shearer had witnessed: a translucent, shrouded figure gliding down the stairs, her face obscured by a glowing, mist-like veil, her body clad in the distinct shape of an old-fashioned gown. They had captured the brown lady on film. The photograph was an immediate sensation when published. It was analyzed by technical experts at Country Life and even by officials at the Kodak company, who meticulously examined the original glass plate. Their consensus was unanimous. The plate showed no signs of a double exposure, and the negative had not been tampered with or faked in any darkroom trickery. The figure was, by all technical accounts of the time, genuinely present on the staircase when the photograph was taken. This official stamp of approval from a reputable publication and a leading photographic technology company lent the image an air of credibility that was, and still is, almost unprecedented in the field of paranormal research. For the first time, a ghost had not just been seen, but had been objectively recorded by a neutral, professional source using standard equipment, creating a piece of evidence that was incredibly difficult to dismiss. Of course, such a controversial image was bound to attract skeptics, and over the decades, several alternative theories have been proposed. One of the most persistent suggests that the photograph is a result of a simple double exposure, where the image of a living person, perhaps a maid or even Shearer himself, was accidentally superimposed onto the plate. However, this theory is heavily undermined by the sworn testimonies of both photographers and the technical analysis of the single, unmanipulated glass negative. Others have proposed that the figure is a result of a smudge on the lens or a deliberate hoax involving a statue or a person smeared with grease. Yet, none of these explanations adequately account for the specific timing Shearer seeing the form materialize and vanish, or the unique, ethereal quality of the apparition, which lacks the solidity of a physical person and instead appears luminous and semi-transparent. The most compelling argument for its authenticity remains the reputations of the men involved. They were not ghost hunters seeking fame, but commercial photographers on a straightforward assignment, with everything to lose and nothing to gain from perpetrating a hoax. The legacy of the Brown Lady photograph is immeasurable. It did more than just provide a picture of a ghost. It fundamentally shifted the paradigm of paranormal investigation. Before 1936, ghost stories were largely reliant on eyewitness testimony, which is inherently subjective and fallible. The Country Life photograph introduced the concept of physical, technological evidence into the mainstream. It inspired a new generation of researchers to pick up cameras and later electromagnetic field meters and audio recorders in the hope of capturing similar incontrovertible proof. The image became the gold standard, the benchmark against which all other paranormal photographs would be measured. Its enduring power lies in its simplicity and its clarity. It is not a vague, blurry orb or a questionable shadow, but a detailed, human-like form captured with the photographic technology of its day. It forces the viewer to confront a direct question. If this is not a ghost, then what, under the sworn testimony of two credible witnesses and the technical analysis of experts, could it possibly be? The Brown Lady of Raynham Hall, through that one frozen moment in time, transcended her own tragic story to become an enduring icon, a silent challenge from the past that continues to captivate, terrify, and provoke debate nearly a century later. The legend of the Lincoln Ghost Train, however, is far more than just a collection of eerie eyewitness accounts. It is a profound piece of American folklore, deeply rooted in the collective trauma and technological awe of the 19th century. To truly understand why this specific phantom has endured for over a century and a half, we must look past the spectral sightings and into the heart of a nation shattered by the loss of its leader. Abraham Lincoln's assassination in April 1865 was not just a political murder. It was a cataclysmic event that ripped through the fabric of a country already frayed by 4 years of civil war. Just days after the surrender at Appomattox, this murder felt like a cruel, senseless theft of the hard-won peace, plunging the nation into a state of communal mourning on a scale it had never before experienced. The subsequent 13-day funeral journey of the Lincoln Special Train was in essence a mobile wake for a grieving republic, millions of citizens from Washington, D.C. to Springfield, Illinois, lined the tracks to catch a fleeting glimpse of the funeral car, their silent vigil or tearful prayers creating a powerful, nationwide ritual of farewell. This unprecedented public outpouring of sorrow, focused so intently on the movement of a train, is the fertile ground from which the ghost train legend sprouted, imprinted onto the collective consciousness of an entire people. The railroad itself was the perfect vehicle for such a myth to form. In the mid-19th century, the locomotive was the ultimate symbol of modern power, progress, and connection. It was a roaring, steam-belching marvel that shrank vast distances and bound the expanding nation together. Yet it was also a dangerous and mysterious force, often unpredictable and sometimes deadly. This dual nature, the bringer of both life and death, made the train a powerful archetype in the human psyche. When this symbol of national unity was tasked with carrying the martyred president home, the train itself was elevated into a sacred object. It became a rolling cathedral, its tracks a designated path of national pilgrimage. The folklore of the Lincoln Ghost Train can be seen as a cultural mechanism to keep that pilgrimage alive, to allow the ritual of mourning to continue indefinitely. The phantom is not merely a random ghost, it is a symbolic reenactment of that foundational moment of national grief, a way for the story to be retold and the emotional weight to be felt by subsequent generations who did not witness the original event. Psychologically, several factors intertwine to explain the persistence of these sightings. The power of suggestion plays a significant role. Once a legend is established in a specific location, people traveling through that area are primed to interpret ambiguous stimuli through a supernatural lens. The combination of low light, fog, and the mournful sound of a distant train whistle from a different, modern track can easily be misconstrued by a brain expecting to witness the extraordinary. This is compounded by pareidolia, the human tendency to find familiar patterns in random stimuli, where shifting fog and shadows might coalesce into the shape of a vintage train for a fleeting moment. But beyond these cognitive explanations, the legend taps into something deeper, a profound human need for continuity and meaning. The idea that a figure as pivotal as Abraham Lincoln would have such a powerful presence that his final journey is eternally memorialized in a spectral form provides a sense of cosmic order. It suggests that great men are not simply erased by death, and that events of immense historical significance leave a permanent mark on the world, one that can, under the right conditions, be perceived by the living. The train's specific route through the Hudson Valley adds another layer of symbolic resonance. This area is steeped in its own earlier folklore, most notably the tales of Washington Irving's Headless Horseman, a story of another restless spirit haunting the region's dark roads. The Lincoln Ghost Train can be seen as a modern, industrial-age evolution of this older Gothic tradition, replacing the spectral steed with a phantom locomotive, but serving a similar narrative function as a harbinger and a reminder of mortality. Furthermore, the continued sightings, often reported by railroad workers and police officers, individuals not typically given to flights of fancy, lend a compelling air of credibility. These are people intimately familiar with the sights and sounds of the rails, and their insistence that what they witnessed was unlike any ordinary train forces us to consider the possibility that some experiences defy simple explanation. The Lincoln Ghost Train endures because it is a perfect folkloric storm, blending verifiable history with deep-seated human emotion, the symbolism of technology with the mystery of the afterlife, creating a haunting that is as much about the soul of a nation as it is about the spirit of a president. While the original bell which torment ended with John Bell's death in the 1820s, the story was far from over, re-emerging with a vengeance in the modern era as a prime target for paranormal investigators armed with a new arsenal of electronic gear. The humble Tennessee farmland has become a pilgrimage site for ghost hunting teams and television producers, all hoping to capture definitive evidence of the entity that terrorized the Bell family and perhaps even communicate with the infamous Kate Batts herself. This contemporary chapter of the legend demonstrates how a 200-year-old story can not only survive but actively evolve, adapting to the tools and sensibilities of a new century. Shows like the Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures and the Discovery Plus series The Paranormal and the Unexplained have dedicated entire episodes to the case, transforming the quiet woods of Adams into a dramatic backdrop for a high-tech spectral showdown. These productions bring the legend to millions of viewers, but they also apply a new layer of scrutiny, attempting to separate enduring folklore from measurable paranormal activity using devices the Bell family could never have imagined. The methodology of these modern investigations is a world away from the 19th century witnesses who relied solely on their ears and eyes. Teams now descend upon the property and its surrounding cave system with electromagnetic field meters, or EMF readers, which are used to detect fluctuations in energy that are often attributed to spirit presence. Investigators frequently report wild, unexplained spikes on these devices in areas connected to the legend, such as the site of the original Bell home or deep within the subterranean passages of the Bell Witch Cave. Another staple of the modern ghost hunter's toolkit is the spirit box, a device that rapidly scans through radio frequencies, creating a cacophony of white noise from which disembodied voices, known as electronic voice phenomena or EVP, are said to emerge. In these sessions, investigators directly address the entity, asking questions about its identity and intentions. The responses captured are often chilling. Some teams claim to have recorded direct answers like "Kate" or "I'm here," while others have captured threats and growls that echo the entity's historically malicious nature. Thermal imaging cameras often complement these audio tools, with investigators pointing to sudden, human-shaped cold spots that appear in the cave or the fleeting heat signatures of figures that are not visible to the naked eye. Yet for every compelling piece of evidence gathered, a wave of skepticism and dedicated debunking follows closely behind. Critics argue that the suggestive power of the legend itself can influence both investigators and their equipment. The EMF spikes attributed to a ghost could just as easily be caused by underground water currents, buried power lines, or even the investigator's own electronic equipment. The fragmented voices from a spirit box, skeptics contend, are a classic example of pareidolia, the human brain's tendency to find patterns like familiar words in random noise. A skeptic listening to the same audio sweep might hear only gibberish where a believer hears a clear sentence. Furthermore, the natural acoustics of the Bell Witch Cave are often proposed as a rational explanation for many of the reported sounds, Wind whistling through narrow passages and water dripping in deep chambers can create a symphony of knocks, whispers, and moans that could easily be misinterpreted as an intelligent presence. These debunking attempts are not meant to dismiss the historical accounts, but to apply a modern, scientific lens to the ongoing phenomena, challenging investigators to provide evidence that can withstand rigorous scrutiny. One of the most significant recent developments has been the rise of historical archaeology at the site. Researchers have used ground-penetrating radar and other non-invasive techniques to search for the foundations of the original Bell home and outbuildings, hoping to ground the legend in physical reality. By pinpointing the exact locations where these traumatic events unfolded, they hope to provide a more accurate context for any paranormal data collected. This fusion of history and technology represents the next frontier in the case, moving beyond simple ghost hunting to a more holistic form of investigation. The legend itself has also expanded in popular culture, inspiring everything from major motion pictures to best-selling novels, each new interpretation adding its own twist and introducing the story to a fresh audience. This constant cultural recycling ensures that the name Bell, which remains in the public consciousness, fueling an industry of tours, books, and conferences that keep the economic and supernatural energy of Adams, Tennessee, very much alive. Ultimately, the modern investigations into the Bell Witch phenomenon reveal less about the existence of Kate Bat's ghost and more about our own enduring fascination with the unknown. The case serves as a perfect proxy for the entire field of paranormal research, a historic, well-documented account that provides a tantalizing benchmark against which to test new theories and technologies. Whether one is a believer convinced by the modern EVP recordings or a skeptic who sees only flawed methodology and psychological suggestion, the Bell Witch's power is undeniable. It forces us to question the nature of evidence, the reliability of human perception, and the possibility that some stories are simply too powerful to fade away. The hammers may have fallen silent on Sarah Winchester's mansion, but in the hills of Tennessee, the digital static of a spirit box continues the conversation that began 2 centuries ago, proving that a legend rooted in the past is more than capable of speaking to the future. While the phantom trumpet of Montgomery Clift provides a haunting soundtrack to the hotel's history, his spirit is known for far more than just musical interludes. The actor's presence is deeply woven into the fabric of his former room, number 928, where he resided for 3 months while filming From Here to Eternity. It was a period of intense focus for the notoriously meticulous performer, and it seems that dedication to his craft has followed him into the afterlife. Guests and housekeeping staff have consistently reported an unusual phenomenon, the distinct, muffled sound of a man's voice, as if practicing lines or reciting monologues from just beyond the door. Upon investigation, the room is always found empty, the voice vanishing into the silence. This isn't the random noise of a busy hotel. It's an intimate, private rehearsal that has been echoing through the decades, a spectral actor forever preparing for a role that has long since wrapped. This specific activity suggests a residual haunting, a moment of intense personal focus and perhaps anxiety that has been permanently imprinted on the location, replaying for those sensitive enough to hear it. But Clift's ghost isn't solely dedicated to his art. He also displays a playful and sometimes mildly disruptive personality that keeps hotel staff on their toes. He has gained a reputation as a bit of a prankster, a spirit with a penchant for causing minor, inexplicable mischief. Housekeepers tasked with tidying room 928 often find their work subtly undone. Bedside lamps are switched on after being explicitly turned off. The television flickers to life on its own, and the room's temperature can plummet without any change to the thermostat. In one particularly well-documented account, a hotel manager performing a late-night security check entered the room to find the contents of the minibar arranged in a perfect, neat circle in the center of the bed. Nothing was missing or damaged, but the deliberate, almost artistic arrangement was both baffling and unsettling. This behavior paints a more complex picture of the ghost, moving beyond a simple residual echo to what many paranormal researchers would classify as an intelligent haunting, a presence that is aware of its surroundings and capable of interacting with the living world, even if that interaction is just a playful, ghostly joke. The enduring power of these hauntings, from Marilyn's fleeting reflection to Monty's phantom rehearsals, is inextricably linked to the very nature of Hollywood itself. The Roosevelt Hotel is more than just a building. It's a symbol of the Hollywood dream, a place where stars are born, legends are cemented, and fantasies are projected onto the global screen. This concentration of ambition, glamour, and profound vulnerability creates a potent psychic cocktail. For actors like Montgomery Clift, the hotel was not just a temporary residence, it was a sanctuary and a pressure cooker, a place of intense creative struggle and personal isolation. The emotional energy expended within these walls, the thrill of a career-making role, the agony of a performance that doesn't meet one's own impossible standards, the loneliness that can exist even at the center of adoration is a powerful, lingering force. It's as if the very intensity of these lived experiences has saturated the plaster and wood, allowing the most powerful moments to replay long after the final curtain has fallen. The ghosts of the Roosevelt aren't here because of violent death, but because of the immense, life-defining passion they invested in their craft and their time in this iconic institution. This is why the Hollywood Roosevelt remains a glamorous yet haunted icon, a place where the past is not a dusty relic but a vibrant, ongoing performance. The management fully understands this unique appeal, seamlessly blending its paranormal reputation with its legacy of luxury. They offer historical tours that celebrate the building's role in cinema history alongside dedicated ghost tours that guide visitors through its most active supernatural hotspots. Room 928 is one of the most requested accommodations, sought out by curious travelers and paranormal enthusiasts hoping for their own encounter with the meticulous method actor who never truly checked out. The hotel doesn't hide its otherworldly residents. It celebrates them as part of its unique character, the ultimate insiders at the Ultimate Insiders Hotel. In a town built on illusion and the enduring power of image, the Roosevelt stands as a testament to the idea that some stars possess a luminosity so brilliant, it refuses to be dimmed by something as trivial as death, ensuring the party in the Blossom Ballroom and the rehearsals in room 928 continue for eternity. While the Edmund Fitzgerald remains the most famous ghost ship of the Great Lakes, she is far from alone in her spectral wanderings. The vast freshwater seas are a graveyard hosting a fleet of phantoms, each with its own tragic tale and a stubborn refusal to be forgotten by the living. One of the most compelling and well-documented of these is the story of the SS Bannockburn, a steamship that earned the grim nickname, the Flying Dutchman of the Great Lakes. In the early morning hours of November 21, 1902, the Bannockburn, a 245-foot steel-hulled freighter, was making its way across the formidable Lake Superior with a load of grain. It was last seen by the crew of a passing vessel, the Algonquin, fighting its way through a building storm near the dangerous Isle Royale. The captain of the Algonquin noted the Bannockburn was laboring heavily but seemed to be managing the waves. He exchanged signals with the ship and then continued on his course. That was the last confirmed sighting of the Bannockburn and her 20 crew members. No wreckage, no lifeboats, and no bodies were ever found. The ship and every soul aboard had simply vanished into the lake's depths without a trace. It is from this profound and unsettling mystery that the ghost ship legend was born. Almost immediately after the official search was called off, fishermen and sailors began reporting a strange apparition. They would see the distinct silhouette of a steamship matching the Bannockburn's profile, materializing out of the thick fog that often blankets Lake Superior. The phantom ship would appear to be in distress, its lights flickering as it was tossed by phantom waves, before it would suddenly vanish into the mist as if it had never been there. These sightings were not isolated to a single season. They persisted for decades, with remarkably consistent descriptions from witnesses who often had no prior knowledge of the legend. The ghost of the Bannockburn became such a common and accepted part of lake lore that seasoned captains would point it out to their junior crew members, treating it as a rite of passage and a sobering reminder of the lake's deadly power. The sheer lack of closure for the families of the crew, the complete absence of any physical evidence of the ship's fate, seems to have created a vacuum that the legend filled, offering a supernatural explanation for a tragedy that defied all rational understanding. But the Bannockburn is just one specter in a vast, ghostly armada. The Great Lakes are also haunted by the legend of the Griffin, a ship that predates the Bannockburn by over 2 centuries and represents one of the oldest unsolved mysteries in American maritime history. The Griffin was a French sailing vessel commissioned by the explorer Robert de La Salle, and in September 1679, it became the first European ship to sail the upper Great Lakes. After a successful trading voyage, the Griffin, laden with a valuable cargo of furs, set sail from Green Bay to return to Niagara. It was never seen again. The disappearance of the Griffin and its crew of 6 has spawned countless theories, from a devastating storm to an attack by hostile tribes, but no conclusive evidence has ever been found. Its ghost, however, is said to still sail. Witnesses, particularly around the anniversary of its disappearance, have reported seeing the apparition of a 17th-century sailing ship with a distinctive griffin figurehead, its tattered sails billowing in a wind that doesn't touch any other vessel, a phantom from the age of exploration forever trying to complete its final, fateful journey home. These ghost ship tales are far more than simple campfire stories. They are a fundamental part of the cultural fabric of the Great Lakes region, serving as a collective memory of the very real and ever-present dangers of maritime travel. The lakes, especially Lake Superior, are notorious for their gales of November, storms that can whip up with little warning, generating waves that can surpass 30 feet and winds that can shred steel. Before modern weather forecasting and ship-to-shore radio, a captain's decision to set sail was a literal gamble with fate. The ghost stories function as oral history, passing down the lessons of these tragedies from one generation of sailors to the next. They immortalize the names of ships and crews that might otherwise be lost to time, ensuring that the sacrifices made in building the nation's heartland are not forgotten. Every time a sailor recounts the tale of the vanishing Bannockburn or the ancient Griffin, they are acknowledging the power of the lakes and paying a form of respect to those who came before them and never returned to port. This human need to memorialize tragedy through ghost stories is a powerful psychological impulse. When a disaster is as vast and incomprehensible as a ship sinking with all hands, the human mind struggles to process the finality and the chaos. A ghost story provides a narrative structure to the chaos. It offers a form of continuity, suggesting that the ship and its crew are not truly gone, but are instead preserved in a spectral state, forever sailing the waters they loved or feared. This is profoundly comforting, both for the communities that lost their loved ones and for the wider culture that relies on these waterways. The phantom vessels become eternal monuments, more dynamic and evocative than any stone plaque on a shore. They transform the lakes from mere bodies of water into living, breathing repositories of history, where every fog bank might conceal a chapter from the past and every mournful blast of a distant ship's horn might just be an echo from a crew that set sail a century ago, forever navigating the thin, misty line between our world and the next. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the Winchester Mystery House, the element that truly embodies Sarah Winchester's profound paranoia, lies not in its bewildering rooms but in what exists beneath them, a hidden, subterranean world of secret tunnels. While the upper floors were built to baffle and misdirect spirits, these underground passages suggest a much deeper level of fear, a place of last resort should the spectral inhabitants ever breach her labyrinthine defenses above. These tunnels, narrow and constructed of the same fine materials as the rest of the mansion, wind their way beneath the foundation, connecting seemingly unrelated parts of the estate. Their exact purpose remains one of the house's greatest mysteries. Some historians speculate they were intended as escape routes, allowing Sarah to flee from one section of the house to another without being seen, or potentially even to exit the property entirely if a malevolent force ever cornered her. Others believe they served as conduits for the spirits themselves, a way to channel their energy away from the living quarters, a literal underground railroad for the dead. This architectural duality, beautiful, ornate rooms above for the living, and a dark, confined network below for the unseen, perfectly captures the two sides of Sarah Winchester's psyche. The public-facing, wealthy heiress and the private, terrified woman perpetually preparing for a siege from beyond the grave. This entire, decades-long architectural endeavor was fueled by Sarah's deep and unwavering commitment to spiritualism, a belief system that took hold of her in the wake of her devastating personal losses. After the deaths of her infant daughter and her husband, the grieving widow was reportedly adrift in a sea of sorrow. It was then, according to the most persistent legend, that she visited a well-known Boston medium who delivered a terrifying psychic diagnosis. The medium claimed the Winchester family was cursed, haunted by the vengeful spirits of the countless thousands who had been killed by the Winchester rifle, the very weapon that had built her fortune. The only way to atone for this bloodshed and appease these angry ghosts was to move west and build a grand house for them. Most chillingly, the medium instructed that construction must never, ever cease. If the hammers ever fell silent, Sarah would die and the spirits would finally claim her. Whether this seance actually occurred or is a later embellishment, it perfectly encapsulates the driving force behind the mansion. Sarah wasn't just building a home, she was engaging in a lifelong act of spiritual penance and survival, using architecture as both a shield and an offering. Her nightly seances in the Blue Room were said to be the source of the next day's building plans, with spirits supposedly whispering their demands for more stairs, doors, or windows directly into her ear, turning her into a living conduit for the design of her own haunted fortress. The direct result of this obsession is a structure that feels less like a home and more like a physical manifestation of a troubled mind. And it is this very disorienting quality that fuels the countless reports of paranormal activity from visitors and staff. The sheer effort of navigating the house is often the first step toward a supernatural encounter. Tour groups frequently have to pause as members become separated, having taken a wrong turn into a hallway that loops back on itself or a staircase that deposits them in an entirely different wing from the rest of their party. In these moments of confusion and isolation, people report sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature and the overwhelming sensation of being watched from one of the many doors that open onto nothing. The house seems to come alive, using its own confusing layout to single out individuals for a more personal experience. Apparitions are frequently reported in these peripheral spaces, the fleeting glimpse of a woman in a 19th century black dress, believed to be Sarah herself, turning a corner and vanishing, or the shadowy figure of a workman carrying tools in a corridor that dead ends at a blank wall. These are not the detailed, full-bodied phantoms of some hauntings, but rather quick, ghostly impressions, as if the residual energy of the endless construction has left behind echoes of the past, forever repeating their assigned tasks. One of the most compelling modern accounts that ties the house's design directly to its hauntings comes from a nighttime security guard doing his rounds. He reported hearing the distinct sound of footsteps coming from a section of the second floor that was, according to the building's layout, completely inaccessible from where he was standing. Intrigued and alarmed, he radioed his partner and they attempted to pinpoint the source. They could hear the steps moving through what should have been a solid wall, then descending a staircase that, on the blueprints, did not exist. The sounds led them on a chase through several twisting hallways before stopping abruptly in a small, windowless room that was only accessible through a hidden door disguised as a cupboard. The room was empty, but both guards reported a profound feeling of sadness and exhaustion, as if they had just interrupted a ghost forever trying to find its way out of a trap that Sarah Winchester had built over a century before. This story perfectly illustrates the unique nature of the haunting here. The ghosts aren't just in the house, they are of the house, their movements and frustrations dictated by the very architecture designed to contain them. This seamless fusion of architectural madness and supernatural legend is what cements the Winchester Mystery House's unique place in the landscape of American hauntings. It is not the site of a single, violent tragedy like the LaLaurie Mansion, nor is it a place where famous individuals linger like the White House. Instead, it is a haunting that was willed into existence, a sprawling, expensive, and breathtakingly strange monument to one woman's fear of the afterlife. The phenomena reported here are inextricably linked to the building's design, the phantom hammering that echoes its perpetual construction, the lost spirits mirroring the experience of every disoriented visitor, and the feeling of being trapped in an inescapable maze that was, in the end, built for that very purpose. The house stands as a powerful testament to the idea that a haunting does not always require a murder or a sudden death. It can also be born from a deep, abiding, and ultimately lifelong grief, a sorrow so immense that one would spend a fortune to build a labyrinth, hoping against hope to keep the ghosts at bay, only to become the central ghost within it herself. The profound connection visitors feel at Gettysburg often transcends a simple historical interest, manifesting in intensely personal and sometimes interactive encounters with the soldiers who never left. These are not fleeting shadows, they are full-bodied, tangible apparitions that seem to occupy the same physical space as the living. One of the most chillingly detailed accounts comes from a family visiting Little Round Top at dusk. As they stood near the rocky outcrops known as Devil's Den, they noticed a man in a tattered, butternut gray uniform leaning against a boulder. He appeared solid, his face smudged with dirt and etched with exhaustion. Thinking he was a dedicated reenactor, the father approached to compliment his authenticity. The man looked up, made eye contact, and gave a slow, weary nod before simply dissolving into the fading light, leaving the family in stunned silence, the cool evening air suddenly feeling charged with a sorrow that was almost 2 centuries old. This kind of encounter, where a spirit seems to acknowledge the living, suggests an intelligent haunting, a moment where the veil between past and present becomes impossibly thin. Beyond these visual specters, the battlefield is alive with ghostly voices, whispers from the past that are captured not only on electronic recording devices but heard directly by visitors in real time. The Peach Orchard, a site of horrific carnage, is notorious for these auditory phenomena. People walking the quiet, peaceful grounds have reported hearing desperate, muffled pleas for water or soft calls for mother drifting on the breeze, the voices sounding both close and impossibly distant. In one particularly poignant story, a woman sitting alone on a bench near the Virginia Memorial distinctly heard a young, Southern-accented voice whisper directly into her ear, "I'm scared." The words were so clear and so filled with childlike terror that she was moved to tears, feeling not fright but a profound empathy for the young soldier, likely little more than a boy, whose final moments of fear were somehow imprinted on that very spot. These disembodied voices are often the most emotionally devastating encounters, cutting through time to deliver a raw, human connection to the individual suffering that statistics can never convey. The emotional impact of these experiences is what truly sets Gettysburg apart. Visitors don't just leave with a story about seeing a ghost, they leave having felt a piece of the battle's enduring trauma. Many describe an overwhelming and often unexpected wave of sadness, confusion, or even sheer panic that washes over them in specific locations, emotions that feel foreign and are gone as quickly as they came. A park ranger recounted the story of a burly, no-nonsense ex-Marine who broke down sobbing while standing at the bloody angle on the Confederate assault line. The man later confessed he had been overcome with a visceral, crushing sense of hopelessness and the certainty that he was about to die, a feeling so powerful and specific it could not be explained by his own imagination. This transfer of emotion, this psychic residue of the battle's most intense moments, suggests that what haunts Gettysburg is not just the image of the soldiers, but the very echo of their final, powerful feelings, their courage, their fear, and their despair forever lingering in the fields where they were felt so acutely. This incredible preservation of both the landscape and its spectral energy is no accident. The battlefield's status as a national military park has frozen it in time, creating a perfect vessel for these hauntings. Unlike so many historic sites that have been paved over, built upon, or fundamentally altered, the rolling hills, stone walls, and woodlots of Gettysburg look much as they did in July 1863. This lack of change is crucial. Paranormal researchers often theorize that spirits are anchored to a location as they knew it in life, and when that location remains recognizable, their connection to it remains strong. The careful maintenance of the land acts as a constant trigger, a stable environment that allows the past to replay. Every preserved fence line, every monument placed on the exact spot where a regiment stood, and every acre of untouched field reinforces the reality of the event, providing a tangible anchor for the intangible echoes of the past. The park is not just a memorial, it is a sustained environment, a stage that is perpetually set, allowing the actors from its most tragic performance to occasionally step back into the spotlight. This makes Gettysburg a living memorial in the most literal sense. The hauntings are an active, dynamic part of its identity, ensuring that the battle is not a closed chapter in a history book but an ongoing conversation with the past. The countless personal stories collected over generations from park rangers, historians, and millions of visitors form a collective testimony that is impossible to ignore. People from all walks of life with no prior belief in the paranormal arrive as tourists and leave as witnesses, their skepticism replaced by a profound sense of having touched history. The battlefield's ghosts do not appear to frighten us but to remind us. They are the eternal sentinels of this hallowed ground, ensuring that the sacrifices made there are never reduced to mere abstraction, and that the 50,000 casualties are remembered not as a number, but as individuals, some of whom are still, in their own way, fighting their way home. The exposure of the LaLaurie Mansion's horrors did not bring closure. It merely locked the door on a house of unspeakable suffering, leaving its toxic legacy to seep through the very bricks and into the soul of New Orleans for generations to come. In the immediate aftermath of the 1834 fire and the subsequent mob fury, the mansion stood as a cursed and empty shell for decades, a blight on Royal Street that respectable citizens actively avoided. It was a place too stained by evil for conventional use, a monument to a depravity so profound that it seemed to repel normal life. The building's long and varied history of attempted repurposing reads like a desperate effort to cleanse its indelible stain, each new occupant inadvertently adding another layer to its haunted tapestry. It served as a public school for gifted young girls, an odd choice given its history, where rumors persisted of students hearing phantom screams and feeling invisible hands pulling their hair. It was a music conservatory, a furniture store, a bar, and even a tenement apartment building, with residents and employees from every era consistently reporting the same core phenomena. The sound of chains rattling in empty rooms, objects flying off shelves, and an oppressive, suffocating sense of dread that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Modern paranormal investigations have only amplified the mansion's terrifying reputation, providing technological validation for the centuries of whispered accounts. When the property was purchased and meticulously renovated into upscale apartments in the early 2000s, construction crews were the first to bear witness to the residual malevolence. Workers reported tools disappearing and reappearing in impossible locations, power tools turning on by themselves in the dead of night, and a pervasive feeling of being shoved or scratched by unseen hands. The most compelling modern evidence, however, comes from professional paranormal research teams granted access to the property. Using electromagnetic field meters, they have documented wild, unexplainable energy spikes, particularly in the attic space and the courtyard. Electronic voice phenomenon recordings have captured some of the most chilling audio in the field: agonized, guttural moans, the distinct sound of a whip cracking, and clear, whispered pleas for help. Thermal imaging cameras have captured sudden, human-shaped cold spots that move independently through rooms, and in one famous instance, a dark, shadowy mass was filmed flowing up a wall before dissipating into nothing. These aren't the gentle, residual hauntings of a bygone era. They are the recordings of an active, intelligent, and deeply tormented presence that seems fully aware of the investigator's intrusion. The mansion's place in the modern consciousness was explosively cemented by its central role in the third season of the blockbuster television series American Horror Story, Coven. The show took the historical framework of Delphine LaLaurie and amplified it for dramatic effect, portraying her as an immortal vampire trapped in her own attic for over a century. While this was a fictionalized account, it brilliantly captured the essence of the legend, the unending punishment for unimaginable cruelty. The show's portrayal introduced the LaLaurie story to a global audience of millions, transforming a local New Orleans ghost story into a universally recognized icon of American horror. However, this newfound fame created a complex tension. While the series brought massive tourism and interest, it also risked trivializing the very real, historical suffering of the enslaved individuals who were tortured and murdered within those walls. The true horror of the LaLaurie mansion is not a fantastical tale of vampirism, but the brutal, documented reality of American slavery and the extreme human cruelty it enabled. And so, the LaLaurie mansion endures not as a simple haunted house, but as a permanent, weeping scar on the face of New Orleans. Its chilling legacy is a testament to the idea that some evils are so profound they cannot be scrubbed away by paint, renovation, or the passage of time. It stands as an unavoidable monument to the city's darkest chapter, a physical reminder of the brutal foundation upon which its vibrant culture of jazz and celebration was partially built. The continuous stream of paranormal reports from the 19th century to the digital age ensures that the victims are never forgotten, their screams eternally echoing in the recordings of investigators and the experiences of unwitting visitors serve as a powerful, haunting indictment. They are a permanent reminder of the price of unchecked power and inhumanity, forcing us to remember that behind the elegant ironwork and pastel hues of the French Quarter lies a history of pain so intense, its echoes refuse to be silenced by the joyous noise of the present. While the personal accounts of visitors and staff provide a powerful narrative, the St. Augustine Lighthouse has also become a living laboratory for paranormal research, attracting investigators who aim to move beyond anecdotal evidence and into the realm of measurable data. This scientific approach has transformed the site from a place of local legend into a nationally recognized hub for the study of unexplained phenomena. Teams equipped with sophisticated gear have conducted countless overnight investigations, focusing their efforts on the most active areas: the tower itself, the keeper's house, and the grounds where the Pitti sisters met their tragic end. One of the primary tools in their arsenal is thermal imaging, a technology that detects variations in heat, and the results have been startlingly consistent. Investigators have documented sudden, highly localized cold spots materializing out of nowhere, often taking on a humanoid shape. These anomalies are not vague blobs. They are distinct, person-sized pockets of intense cold that will appear in the middle of a warm room or on the staircase, linger for a few moments as if observing the living, and then vanish just as quickly. These thermal fluctuations are often accompanied by personal sensations of dread or sadness reported by the investigators on site, suggesting a direct correlation between the physical data and the emotional energy of the location. Perhaps the most compelling evidence gathered at the lighthouse comes from electronic voice phenomena, or EVP sessions. These sessions involve researchers asking questions into the silence and later analyzing their recordings for disembodied responses that were inaudible to the human ear at the time. The lighthouse, with its hard, resonant surfaces, seems to be a perfect environment for capturing these phantom voices. The recordings from these sessions are often chillingly clear and contextually relevant. In the keeper's house, investigators have captured the faint but distinct sound of children's laughter, seemingly in response to a question or a soft, whispered hello. More poignant are the responses captured in the tower. On one widely circulated recording, an investigator standing near the spot where the girl's cart crashed asked, "Is there a little girl here who wants to play?" After a moment of silence, a clear, high-pitched voice, full of eerie clarity, responded with a single word, "Hide." Another session near the base of the tower captured a desperate, whispered plea of "Help me," a sound that evokes the immediate aftermath of the tragic accident. These are not the ambiguous, staticky noises that can be dismissed as radio interference. They are intelligent, direct communications that suggest a conscious awareness of the investigator's presence and questions. Researchers who have studied the St. Augustine Lighthouse and other similar sites often point to a specific set of reasons why lighthouses seem to be such potent centers for paranormal activity. The first and most powerful factor is tragedy. Lighthouses are, by their very nature, built in treacherous locations on rocky outcrops, shifting sands, and eroding coastlines, places where shipwrecks and drownings are a constant, grim reality. The keepers and their families lived with this danger every day, and many lost their lives to the very seas they were trying to tame. This constant exposure to death and the intense emotional stress of the job, the responsibility for countless sailors' lives, the isolation, the fury of the storms creates a pressure cooker of human emotion that many believe can imprint itself on a location. Furthermore, the lifestyle was one of profound repetition and routine. A keeper's life was defined by the endless, monotonous cycle of maintaining the light, winding the clockwork mechanism, and logging weather data. This powerful, ingrained routine, practiced for decades, is thought to create a strong residual energy, a psychic recording that can replay long after the keeper has passed away, manifesting as the sound of phantom footsteps on the stairs or the feeling of a watchful presence in the lantern room. The specific tragedies at the St. Augustine Lighthouse provide a perfect case study for this theory. The death of the Pitti sisters was a sudden, violent, and emotionally devastating event for the entire community, cutting two young lives short in a moment of what should have been simple childhood fun. The raw, unfulfilled potential and the profound grief of their family creates the kind of intense emotional energy that paranormal researchers argue can anchor a spirit to a place. Similarly, the death of keeper Joseph Andrew, who fell from a great height while performing his duty, represents another classic trigger for a haunting, a sudden, traumatic death, often called a death shock, that can prevent a spirit from moving on. His subsequent attachment to the tower, along with his wife Maria's historic role, adds layers of dedication and love to the site's spiritual tapestry. It is this combination of sudden tragedy and lifelong devotion that makes the St. Augustine Lighthouse such a rich and active paranormal site, a place where the echoes of the past are not only felt in the gut, but are now being documented by the cold, logical eye of modern technology, offering a tantalizing bridge between the world of feeling and the world of fact. And while the public face of the White House is one of stately authority and political power, Its private quarters have for centuries been the setting for an ongoing drama that exists just beyond the official record, a continuous, whispered narrative of spectral encounters reported by the very families who called it home. The sheer number of presidents, first ladies, and staff members who have admitted to sensing an otherworldly presence within those walls is staggering, creating a unique historical archive of the paranormal that spans nearly the entire history of the Republic. These are not the tales of tourists or outsiders, but the personal, often reluctant, admissions of the nation's leaders, adding a profound layer of credibility to the idea that the executive residence is as much a haunted mansion as it is a seat of government. From the early days of the Republic to the modern era, these stories have been passed down from one first family to the next, a kind of informal oral history that hints at the immense psychological weight of residing in a building so saturated with national trauma and triumph. The Roosevelt administration, for instance, provides some of the most compelling and well-documented accounts. Eleanor Roosevelt, a woman known for her formidable pragmatism and intellect, never publicly claimed to have seen a ghost, but she often spoke of a palpable, watchful presence that she felt while working alone late at night in the Lincoln bedroom, which she used as a study. She described a specific sensation not of fear, but of being observed by a benevolent, protective force, which she calmly attributed to the spirit of Abraham Lincoln. Her husband, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, was also a believer, though his experience was more auditory. He recounted to aides that on several occasions he was awakened by the distinct, disembodied sound of knocks on his bedroom door that seemed to come from nowhere, a phenomenon that other residents had also linked to Lincoln's restless spirit. Perhaps the most famous Roosevelt-era story involves the visit of Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands. During her stay, she was roused from sleep by a firm knocking at a door. Upon answering it, she was confronted by the spectral figure of Lincoln himself, standing in the hallway in his trademark stovepipe hat. The sight was so shocking that the Queen, a woman not easily unnerved, reportedly fainted dead away on the spot, a story she confirmed herself for the rest of her life. Moving into the late 20th century, the Reagan family added their own distinctive chapter to the White House's ghostly annals. First Lady Nancy Reagan, in particular, was quite open about the strange occurrences they experienced. She spoke of their small dog, a King Charles Spaniel named Rex, who would often freeze in the hallway outside the Lincoln bedroom, barking furiously at something unseen, his fur standing on end before he would suddenly refuse to enter the room. The Reagan's daughter, Maureen, also reported a chilling encounter. She was staying in the Lincoln bedroom on a visit when she awoke to see a translucent, fog-like figure standing outside the window, which was several stories above the ground. The figure, she insisted, was looking directly into the room at her. President Ronald Reagan himself, with his characteristic wit, would joke about the phenomena, but he did not dismiss them. He acknowledged feeling cold spots in certain corridors and mentioned that even his stout-hearted Secret Service agents sometimes reported unease while patrolling the residence's quieter halls after dark, a testament to the pervasive nature of the eerie atmosphere that seems to permeate the private living quarters. What makes these stories so enduring is the way they are woven into the very fabric of the White House experience, passed down almost as a rite of passage. It is said that upon leaving office, President Harry Truman wrote a letter to his successor, warning him about the strange noises and footsteps he and his family had heard during their tenure. This informal tradition of sharing the ghost stories creates a unique bond between first families, a shared secret that transcends political party and ideology. It speaks to a common human experience within an otherwise unimaginably unique living situation. Winston Churchill, no stranger to pressure himself, encountered Lincoln's ghost during a wartime visit, reportedly seeing the president's apparition leaning against the fireplace in the very room where the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. Churchill, ever unflappable, allegedly remarked, "Good evening, Mr. President. You seem to have me at a disadvantage," before the figure faded away. He later stated that he found the encounter fascinating rather than frightening, but he also made a point of never sleeping in that particular room again. These persistent hauntings, documented across so many administrations, reveal something far deeper than a simple belief in ghosts. They illuminate the immense, often unspoken, psychological pressure of residing in the White House. This is a building where every corner echoes with world-altering decisions, where the grief of personal loss, like the death of Lincoln's son, Willie, or the assassinations that have traumatized the nation, mingles with the stress of global crisis. For the first families who lived there, it is not just a home but a goldfish bowl of unparalleled scrutiny, a place where history is both a burden and an inspiration. The recurring spirit of Abraham Lincoln, more than any other, serves as a symbolic anchor for this weight. He represents the ultimate presidential burden, a leader who guided the nation through its most divisive war and paid for it with his life. His ghost is a constant, somber reminder of the stakes of power, a spectral embodiment of the loneliness, sacrifice, and immense responsibility that comes with the office. The hauntings, therefore, are not just chilling anecdotes, they are a profound expression of the living's connection to the past, a way for each new resident to physically feel the presence of history and understand that they are now part of a continuum that stretches back through tragedy and triumph, forever watched over by the ghosts of the presidents who came before. Yet for all the chilling consistency of the Resurrection Mary story, one of the most compelling aspects of this decades-old mystery is the search for the real woman behind the phantom. The legend is not a faceless myth. Investigators and historians have long tried to match the ghost to an actual tragic death, and several plausible candidates have emerged from the old cemeteries and newspaper archives of Chicago. The most frequently cited possibility is a young woman named Mary Bregavi. In 1934, this 16-year-old girl was tragically killed in a horrific traffic accident on Lincoln Avenue after leaving a dance. The details are hauntingly similar. She was young, she had been at a social event, and her death was sudden and violent. However, the location of her accident does not align perfectly with the Archer Avenue corridor, leaving some researchers skeptical. Another strong contender is a Polish girl named Anna Marija Mary Norkus, who died in a car crash in 1927 at the age of 12. Her funeral was held from a home on South Damon Avenue, and she was buried in Resurrection Cemetery, creating a direct geographical link. Yet her young age doesn't quite match the description of the young woman in her late teens or early 20s that most drivers describe. Perhaps the most detailed and grisly potential origin story involves a young woman named Mary Miskowski. As the story goes, in 1935, Mary was dancing at the O. Henry Ballroom when she got into a heated argument with her boyfriend. Upset, she stormed out of the ballroom and began walking home alone down Archer Avenue. In her distress, she was struck and killed by a hit-and-run driver. Her body was reportedly found the next morning, and she was buried in Resurrection Cemetery. This version of events contains all the classic elements: the dance hall quarrel, the lonely walk, the sudden death on Archer Avenue, and her final resting place. It perfectly mirrors the story told by Jerry Pallas and others, providing a heartbreakingly plausible foundation for the entire legend. The fact that no single candidate can be definitively proven, however, only adds to the mystery. It allows the legend to remain fluid, absorbing the details of multiple real-life tragedies into one overarching, spectral narrative of a young life cut short on the way home from a dance, forever uniting these lost girls under the single, sorrowful name of Resurrection Mary. The cultural footprint of this Chicago phantom is immense, transforming her from a local ghost story into a genuine piece of American folklore. She has been the subject of countless books, documentaries, and television episodes on shows like Unsolved Mysteries and In Search Of, each presentation introducing her tragic tale to a new generation. Local businesses have capitalized on the legend for decades, with bars and restaurants along Archer Avenue referencing the story, and ghost tours making the pilgrimage to the cemetery gates a staple of their itinerary. This commercial embrace hasn't cheapened the legend. Instead, it has woven Mary into the daily life of the community, making her a permanent, if spectral, resident. Her story is shared by taxi drivers who warn their fares, by parents telling their children a cautionary tale about the dangers of the road, and by groups of friends daring each other to drive down Archer Avenue at midnight. She has become a shared cultural touchstone, a story that belongs to the city itself, a piece of oral history that is kept alive not in archives but in the collective memory of its people. The sheer volume of alleged sightings over the years is staggering, and they come from a wide cross-section of seemingly credible individuals. One of the most famous accounts from the latter half of the 20th century came from a cab driver who picked up a fare matching Mary's description outside the former Willowbrook Ballroom. She was silent during the ride, simply pointing ahead to indicate the direction. As they neared Resurrection Cemetery, she vanished from the back seat, leaving the driver so shaken he reported the incident to his dispatcher and the police. In another compelling case from the 1970s, a man named Phil B. was driving home from a family gathering when he saw a young woman in a white dress standing near the cemetery. He offered her a ride and she got in, giving him an address on the south side. As they drove, he attempted conversation, but she remained quiet, staring out the window. When he glanced over after passing the cemetery, she was gone. He was so disturbed that he went to the address she had given him the next day, only to be told by an elderly woman that the person he described was her daughter, who had died many years before in an accident. These first-hand testimonies, repeated with remarkable consistency across different decades, lend an undeniable weight to the legend that is difficult to dismiss as mere urban myth. When we place Resurrection Mary alongside other phantom hitchhiker tales from around the world, we see both universal themes and uniquely American twists. In Japan, for example, there is the legend of Kuchisake Anna, the slit-mouthed woman who haunts roadsides but is a far more malevolent figure. In Mexico, tales of La Llorona, the wailing woman, often involve her appearing near waterways and asking for a ride to find her lost children. The classic American version, epitomized by Mary, is typically less overtly frightening and more melancholic. She is not a vengeful spirit seeking to harm, but a lost soul trapped in a moment of tragic confusion, forever trying to get home. This distinction is crucial. She reflects a cultural narrative centered on the innocence lost, the dangers faced by young people, and the universal yearning for a safe return that was tragically denied. Her story is not one of horror but of profound sadness, a quality that makes her more relatable and her legend more enduring. Ultimately, the power of Resurrection Mary lies in her perfect encapsulation of a specific, haunting human experience. She is the embodiment of that universal parental fear, the child who goes out for the evening and never returns. She represents the vulnerability of being young and alone on a dark road, and the sudden, arbitrary cruelty of a fatal accident. Her story is a ghostly cautionary tale that resonates on a deeply emotional level. The lonely stretch of Archer Avenue serves as the perfect stage for this drama, a liminal space between the vibrant life of the dance halls and the finality of the cemetery, a physical representation of the journey she is doomed to repeat. The legend persists because it is more than just a story. It is a way for a community to process the very real, ever-present danger of the road and to memorialize in a collective and supernatural way all the young lives that have been lost on their way home. She is Chicago's eternal daughter, a reminder that some journeys remain forever unfinished, and that the line between a safe arrival and a tragic end can be as thin as the veil between our world and the next. Yet beyond the engine room's industrial echoes and the playful spirit of the pool, the Queen Mary's most poignant hauntings are reserved for the lavish spaces where its wealthiest passengers once dined, danced, and dreamed. Ascending from the working heart of the ship into the first-class areas is like stepping into a perfectly preserved capsule of 1930s Art Deco opulence. Here, in the grand salons and private staterooms, the ghostly activity takes on a more refined, yet equally unsettling character. These were the stages for the ship's most glamorous moments, where the air was thick with the scent of perfume, champagne, and the heady promise of a new life in America. But it seems that for some, the journey never truly ended, their spirits forever lingering in the luxurious surroundings they enjoyed in life, unable or unwilling to disembark. The contrast between the vibrant past and the ship's current status as a stationary hotel creates a uniquely melancholic atmosphere, where the echoes of gala parties now coexist with the quiet footsteps of tourists seeking a brush with the supernatural. One of the most frequently reported apparitions in these upper decks is the spectral figure of a woman in an elegant, white evening gown, often seen gracefully descending the grand staircase near the first-class lounge. Witnesses describe her as beautiful and serene, her attire perfectly capturing the fashion of the ship's golden age. She glides down the steps with an ethereal lightness, seeming to be a part of the grand celebration the ship was built for, before vanishing through a solid wall or simply fading into nothingness. Many believe her to be the spirit of a first-class passenger who died tragically during a voyage, perhaps from a sudden illness or a broken heart, her spirit forever dressed for the party she can no longer attend. Others have reported hearing the faint, sophisticated strains of a big band orchestra and the murmur of polite conversation coming from the empty first-class lounge late at night. Security guards making their rounds have occasionally peeked into the vast, dark room to see the shimmering, translucent forms of couples dancing to music only they can hear, a phantom ball forever frozen in time. The scene is both breathtaking and profoundly sad, a glimpse into a joyous moment that has been playing on a spectral loop for decades. The first-class staterooms themselves are also hotbeds of paranormal activity, with certain rooms gaining notorious reputations among the hotel staff. One particular stateroom, known simply as Room B340, is so active that the hotel often keeps it locked and only assigns it to guests who specifically request a haunted experience. Those brave enough to stay there report a myriad of strange occurrences that suggest an intelligent and sometimes mischievous presence. Guests have awoken in the middle of the night to find the figure of a man in a vintage white naval officer's uniform standing silently at the foot of their bed, simply staring before dematerializing. Others have had the room's lights and faucets turn on and off by themselves, and personal items are frequently moved or neatly rearranged by unseen hands. The most common report, however, involves the bed itself. Many visitors describe the sensation of the mattress depressurizing, as if someone has just sat down on the edge of the bed, only to turn and find the space beside them completely empty. This tactile experience is often accompanied by a sudden, localized drop in temperature, a ghostly chill that seems to emanate from the very spot where the presence made itself known. But who are these elegant phantoms? The ship's history provides some heartbreaking clues. One compelling story involves a young woman named Jackie Lawson, a wealthy first-class passenger who was reportedly traveling to America to marry her fiancé. As the legend goes, she was celebrating her engagement in one of the ship's luxurious lounges when she received a devastating wireless message. Her fiancé had been killed in a car accident. Overwhelmed by grief, she is said to have returned to her stateroom and taken her own life. Many believe it is her spirit, still clad in her beautiful white gown, that is seen wandering the first-class areas, a tragic figure forever trapped between her joyous expectations and her devastating reality. The naval officer, meanwhile, could be the ghost of a crew member who died while on duty, perhaps from a sudden heart attack or an accident, his sense of responsibility so strong that he continues his watch over the passengers in his assigned section. These stories, whether verified or born from collective imagination, provide a human context for the phenomena, transforming random ghost sightings into poignant narratives of love, loss, and duty. This stark contrast between the ship's luxurious past and its haunted present is precisely what draws countless curious tourists and paranormal investigators from around the world. The Queen Mary is not a ruin. It is a meticulously preserved monument to a bygone era of travel, which makes the supernatural encounters within it feel all the more immediate and real. Visitors can walk the same polished decks, dine in the same restored restaurants, and sleep in the same elegant staterooms as the original passengers, making the possibility of encountering a ghost feel less like a visit to a haunted house and more like a step back in time. The hotel management fully embraces this unique selling point, offering daily ghost tours that guide visitors through the most active areas, sharing the stories of Jackie, the naval officer, and the phantom dancers. They even host overnight paranormal investigations, allowing guests to roam the ship with EMF meters and spirit boxes after dark, hoping to capture their own evidence. This commercial embrace doesn't diminish the hauntings. Instead, it creates a living dialogue between the past and the present, where the echoes of the ship's glorious and tragic history have become an integral part of its modern identity, ensuring that the stories of those who never left continue to be told for generations to come. Beneath the elegant guest rooms and bustling main corridors of the Stanley Hotel lies a completely different world, a stark, concrete underbelly that few visitors ever see. While guests marvel at the grand lobby and the stunning mountain views, a network of underground tunnels snakes below their feet, originally built for practical purposes like utility access, steam, heat, and storage. These subterranean passages are a far cry from the opulent world above. They are raw, industrial, and perpetually shadowed, illuminated only by harsh, intermittent lighting. And it is in this forgotten realm, away from the polished gleam of the main hotel, that some of the property's most intense and unsettling paranormal activity is said to occur, presenting a haunting that is grittier and more primal than the refined spirits of the upper floors. Staff members who have worked in these tunnels, from maintenance engineers to housekeepers on forgotten errands, consistently report encounters with aggressive shadow figures. These are not the detailed apparitions of Flora Stanley or a kindly maid, but dense, human-shaped forms of pure blackness that seem to absorb the light around them. Unlike the residual echoes of past parties, these entities display a chilling awareness. They are frequently seen darting across the end of a long tunnel, peering out from behind massive pipes, or standing motionless in the darkness of a storage alcove before vanishing in the blink of an eye. The feeling that accompanies these sightings is universally described as one of profound dread and malevolence. One long-time maintenance worker recounted a story of being followed for nearly the entire length of the West Tunnel, the sound of a second set of footsteps matching his own pace exactly. When he mustered the courage to shine his high-powered flashlight behind him, the beam revealed nothing but empty corridor, yet the footsteps continued for several more seconds before falling silent, leaving him in a silence that felt even more threatening. The auditory phenomena in the tunnels are just as disturbing as the visual ones. The sounds here are not of phantom piano music or cheerful laughter, but of something much more unsettling. Staff report hearing guttural, whispering voices that seem to argue just beyond the edge of hearing, the words indistinct but the tone unmistakably angry. Others have described the sound of something heavy being dragged slowly across the concrete floor, a labored, scraping noise that suggests a struggle or a grim task being performed over and over again. Perhaps the most commonly reported sound is a low, guttural growl that seems to emanate from the walls themselves, a vibration more felt than heard that raises the hair on the back of the neck. These underground hauntings connect directly to the hotel's overall paranormal profile by representing a different stratum of its history: the unseen labor, the mechanical failures, and perhaps even the raw, untamed energy of the land itself that existed long before the hotel was ever built. It's as if the polished social facade of the Stanley is balanced by a darker, more chaotic subconscious lurking just beneath the surface. Maintaining a landmark with such a vibrant and layered haunted reputation presents a unique set of challenges for the staff and management. Embracing the paranormal is a key part of the hotel's brand, drawing in tourists and ghost hunters from around the world, but it requires a delicate balance. The engineering team, for instance, has to troubleshoot malfunctioning equipment in the tunnels, often working in areas where the atmosphere is so thick with unease that it becomes difficult to concentrate. One electrician shared an experience where his tools would repeatedly go missing from his belt, only to be found neatly lined up on a pipe 20 feet away, a frustrating and unnerving game played by an unseen presence. For the hotel's leadership, the decision to offer official ghost tours and even paranormal investigation packages is a strategic one, but it also means managing guest expectations and safety. They train their staff to acknowledge the strange occurrences without causing panic, to share stories in a way that is thrilling yet respectful, and to know when a guest's curiosity has tipped over into genuine distress, requiring a move to a different room or a calming intervention. This active engagement with its own haunted history is what truly sets the Stanley Hotel apart. It doesn't hide from the whispers and the shadows, it has woven them into the very fabric of its identity. The staff, from the general manager to the night cleaners, become custodians of these stories, a modern-day crew tasked with overseeing a location where the past is a very active resident. They understand that the hauntings, from the benevolent to the bewildering, are part of what keeps the hotel alive and relevant. It's a continuous dance between preserving a historic building and catering to the endless public fascination with the unknown, a task that requires equal parts historian, hotelier, and ghost wrangler. The Stanley stands not just as a beautiful relic of a bygone era, but as a living, breathing testament to the idea that some places are so infused with history and emotion that they simply cannot rest, their stories continuing to unfold in the grand ballrooms, the quiet guest rooms, and the deep, echoing tunnels that lie hidden below. But the haunting of the Myrtles plantation is not contained by its walls. The sorrow and tragedy have seeped into the very soil, making the sprawling grounds and gardens a stage for spectral activity as vivid and unsettling as anything found inside the main house. Stepping from the oppressive history of the interior onto the lush, green lawns offers a deceptive sense of peace, but this natural beauty is merely a different backdrop for the property's restless spirits. The gardens, with their ancient, moss-draped oaks and winding pathways, create an atmosphere of secluded intimacy where shadows seem to move with a life of their own and the line between the living and the dead becomes treacherously thin. Here, amid the fragrant magnolia blossoms and the quiet hum of insects, the past feels not just remembered but palpably present, a living entity that watches from the periphery. Perhaps the most heart-wrenching phenomena reported outdoors are the apparitions of children. While the ghost of Chloe and the trapped souls in the mirror dominate the interior lore, the grounds belong to the playful yet tragic spirits of the young. Visitors and staff frequently report seeing the fleeting forms of two little girls in 19th-century dresses, their laughter echoing across the lawn as they chase one another around the towering trees. These are not frightening visions, but rather poignant glimpses of innocence forever imprinted on the landscape. They are most often seen near the old slave quarters, a cluster of small, rustic buildings that stand as a silent testament to the plantation's brutal foundation. It is here that the playfulness can suddenly turn somber. Witnesses have described seeing the same two girls suddenly stop their game, their laughter dying in their throats as they look toward the main house with expressions of confusion and fear before vanishing into the ether, as if reliving the moment they were called inside for the poisoned cake that would end their lives. The slave quarters themselves are a profound epicenter of spiritual energy, a place where the raw, unvarnished pain of the enslaved individuals who lived and died there has left an indelible mark. Apparitions here are less about playful children and more about solemn, sorrowful figures. Shadowy forms are seen moving between the small buildings, often stopping to peer out of dusty windows with hollow eyes. The feeling in this area is consistently described as heavy and oppressive, a weight of sorrow that is almost suffocating. People report hearing the soft, mournful sounds of spirituals being hummed by an unseen voice, a ghostly lament that seems to drift on the evening breeze. Others have experienced the sensation of being gently touched on the shoulder or having their hand held by an invisible presence, a gesture that feels less like a threat and more like a desperate attempt at connection from a spirit longing for acknowledgement and peace. As daylight fades and the deep southern night descends, the grounds undergo a transformation, giving way to one of the property's most bizarre and widely reported phenomena, the sound of phantom parties. From the darkness of the garden, visitors have reported hearing the distinct, muffled sounds of a grand 19th-century soiree. The lively strains of a string quartet, the rhythmic rustle of silk gowns, and the cheerful clink of glasses and polite laughter seem to emanate from a point just beyond the tree line. When investigated, the source is always found to be completely deserted, the music and merriment stopping the moment a living soul draws near. This residual echo of the plantation's opulent past creates a stark, chilling contrast with the known suffering that occurred there. It's as if the land itself is trapped in a cycle, replaying the joyous moments of the wealthy owners alongside the tragic echoes of those they enslaved, a jarring juxtaposition of celebration and sorrow forever playing on an endless loop under the Louisiana stars. What makes the outdoor hauntings of the Myrtles so effective and terrifying is the role of the natural environment itself. The oppressive humidity seems to amplify sounds and distort vision, making every rustle of leaves a potential footstep and every shift of shadow a possible apparition. The thick, hanging moss from the ancient oaks looks like spectral fingers reaching down from the darkness, and the chorus of crickets and frogs can perfectly mask the approach of something or someone unseen. This is not a controlled, indoor environment with limited places for a spirit to hide. This is a vast, open space where anything could be watching from the shadows. The entire property, from the manicured gardens to the overgrown edges near the slave quarters, feels like a single, active entity. It is a place where history is not a subject to be studied, but a force to be experienced, a pervasive energy that confirms the Myrtles plantation is not just a haunted house, but a comprehensively haunted place where every inch of ground holds the memory of the lives and deaths that shaped it. And so our journey across this haunted nation draws to a close, a path that has taken us from the thunderous ghost ships of the Great Lakes to the silent, sorrowful halls of southern plantations, from the glamorous, lingering spirits of Hollywood to the tormented, forgotten souls of Alcatraz. These 33 encounters are more than just a collection of scary stories. They are a tapestry woven with the threads of American history itself, each phantom a poignant reminder of the lives lived, the tragedies endured, and the passions that were so powerful they simply refused to die. They speak to a universal human yearning to believe that there is something more, that our stories do not end with our final breath, and that the echoes of our greatest joys and deepest sorrows can, under the right conditions, resonate through time. These accounts challenge the very boundaries of our understanding, inviting us to look at the quiet, shadowy corners of our own world with a sense of wonder and a newfound curiosity. What makes these tales so endlessly compelling is the way they are inextricably linked to the very soul of the places they inhabit. The phantom train carrying Abraham Lincoln is not just a random specter, it is a rolling monument to a nation's grief. The labyrinth of the Winchester Mystery House is not merely a strange building, it is a physical manifestation of one woman's profound fear and guilt. The soldiers eternally marching the fields of Gettysburg are not generic ghosts, they are the eternal sentinels of a defining national trauma. These are not hauntings in a vacuum, they are the spiritual residue of our collective past, the emotional fingerprints left on the landscape by events and individuals whose impact was so powerful it transcended the limits of their own mortality. They force us to remember that history is not just dates and names in a textbook, but a living, breathing, and sometimes whispering force that continues to shape our present. This exploration of the paranormal also reveals a fascinating aspect of our own humanity, our innate desire to find patterns, meaning, and continuity in the face of the unknown and the tragic. A ghost story is a way to process profound loss, to give a narrative structure to chaos, and to ensure that those who came before us are not entirely forgotten. The legend of Resurrection Mary, for instance, serves as a communal memorial for all the young lives tragically lost on the road, a way for a city to collectively mourn and remember. The persistent spirit of a lighthouse keeper forever tending his light is a testament to the power of duty and love that can anchor a soul to a place. These stories are a form of oral history, a way of passing down lessons, warnings, and memories from one generation to the next, ensuring that the past remains a vital, active participant in our cultural conversation. Now we turn the story over to you. Every one of these legendary hauntings began as a first-hand account, a strange experience shared by someone just like you. Have you ever walked through an old building and felt a sudden, inexplicable chill? Have you heard footsteps in an empty house or captured something unexplainable in a photograph? The landscape of the paranormal is built on these personal encounters, and your story could be the next piece of the puzzle. We invite you to share your own ghostly experiences and unexplained moments in the comments below. Let's continue this conversation and build a community of curious minds, exploring the strange and the mysterious together. If this journey into America's spectral heart has captivated your imagination, there is so much more to discover. Our channel is dedicated to unearthing the most bizarre, fascinating, and hidden facts about this incredible country, from forgotten history to odd landmarks and everything in between. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the unknown. Thank you for joining us on this spine-tingling tour through the stranger side of America. Keep your eyes open, your mind curious, and remember, the next time you hear an unexplained noise in the night, you might just be brushing up against one of the countless stories that make this nation so mysteriously and wonderfully haunted. From the tragic sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald to the personal hell of the LaLaurie mansion, the sheer number and variety of these ghost stories reveals something profound about the American psyche. Why, in a nation so often defined by its forward-looking optimism and technological progress, does this fascination with spectral echoes of the past hold such an unshakable grip on our collective imagination? The answer lies in the very function of these tales. They are not mere entertainments, but a fundamental part of how we process our complex history, confront our deepest fears, and ultimately make sense of our own mortality. Since the earliest days of the colonies, settlers found themselves in a vast, unfamiliar land, and their folklore quickly filled with spirits of the untamed wilderness and the restless dead of conflicts with indigenous peoples. These stories served as cautionary tales, a way to explain the unknown dangers of the New World and to impose a narrative order on a chaotic and often terrifying environment. The ghost story became a tool for coping, a way for communities to bind together against the dark and to process the traumas of harsh winters, disease, and violent displacement. As the nation grew, so too did the role of its ghost lore. The cataclysm of the Civil War, with its unprecedented scale of death and brother against brother violence, created a national wound that demanded a supernatural vocabulary. The countless sightings of soldiers on battlefields like Gettysburg and Antietam can be seen as a form of collective grief management, a way for a shattered country to grapple with the enormity of its loss. These spirits are the eternal representatives of unfinished business, a symbolic refusal to let the sacrifices of that conflict be forgotten or relegated to a dry historical footnote. Similarly, the hauntings of plantations like the Myrtles provide a visceral, undeniable connection to the brutal reality of slavery, forcing us to confront an ugly chapter not through statistics, but through the perceived, lingering pain of the victims. In this way, ghost stories become a form of alternative history, giving voice to those who were silenced in the official records and ensuring that the human cost of our national progress is never entirely erased. On a psychological level, these tales tap into something primal and universal. They give a face and a form to our most abstract anxieties: the fear of death, the pain of loss, the terror of the unseen. A story like Resurrection Mary transforms the very real, mundane danger of a traffic accident into a poignant, personalized myth. She is not just a statistic, she is a symbol of a life interrupted, of the vulnerability we all feel when we say goodbye to loved ones, not knowing if it is for the last time. By giving these fears a narrative structure, we gain a measure of control over them. We can engage with the concept of mortality from the safe distance of a campfire story, exploring the terrifying question of what comes after without having to confront it directly. The ghost story is a safe container for our deepest dread, allowing us to experience a cathartic thrill while reinforcing the comforting boundaries between the living and the dead. The endurance of these legends has been powerfully amplified by the very mechanisms of modern life. The rise of mass media, from pulp magazines and radio dramas to television and the internet, has provided an endless distribution network for ghostly tales. A local legend like the Bell Witch, once confined to rural Tennessee, can now be investigated on a global streaming platform, introducing it to millions and inspiring new generations of curious minds. This media exposure doesn't just spread stories, it actively reshapes and reinvigorates them, adding new layers of interpretation and evidence with every documentary and reality show. Furthermore, the growth of heritage tourism has created a powerful economic incentive to keep these stories alive. Towns like Estes Park, Colorado, and Savannah, Georgia, have built entire industries around their haunted reputations. This commercial embrace ensures that the tales are not only preserved but are continuously curated and performed, transforming them from fading folklore into a living, breathing part of a community's identity and economy. Ultimately, the ghost story remains one of our most resilient and captivating forms of storytelling because it speaks to a fundamental human need, the desire for continuity. The idea that a spirit like Abraham Lincoln still walks the White House corridors, or that the crew of the Edmund Fitzgerald still sails the inland seas, provides a profound sense of connection across time. It suggests that our actions, our passions, and our suffering matter enough to leave a permanent mark on the world. These stories assure us that we are part of a chain, that history is not a series of closed doors but a corridor where the echoes of the past are still faintly audible. They allow us to believe that love, duty, and even tragedy can be so powerful that they transcend the finality of the grave, offering a ghostly promise that perhaps, just perhaps, nothing is ever truly lost.